The Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training wants your thoughts and questions about the recently launched proposals to education transformation in Barbados. Island-wide public consultation meetings are now being held. Join us Wednesday, November 22nd at Harrison College at 6:30 p.m. You can also engage by scanning our QR code on our socials on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at EduTransformBIM, or send a WhatsApp to 535-0604 to get your questions in now. The Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training wants your thoughts and questions about the recently launched proposals to education transformation in Barbados. Island-wide public consultation meetings are now being held. Join us Wednesday, November 22nd at Harrison College at 6:30 p.m. You can also engage by scanning our QR code on our socials on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at EduTransformBIM, or send a WhatsApp to 535-0604 to get your questions in now. The Ministry of Education.
Have your seats. The Minister of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, the Honourable Kay McConney, the Chief Education Officer, Dr. Ramona Archer-Bradshaw, Dr. Rudder, Deputy Chief Education Officer, acting this evening in place of our Director of Education Transformation, Dr. Ida May Denny, Mr. Luke, Vice President of the Barbados Secondary Teachers Union, the BSTU, Mr. Jackman from the Barbados Association of Principals of Public Secondary Schools, all other officers of the Ministry of Education present, teachers, parents, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the public all, good evening. That's about two of us. A wonderful good evening to you. It indeed is a pleasure for me to welcome you to this, the fifth in our series of public consultations on the education transformation proposals. We started in the north of the island at the Alexandra School. Anybody was there? All right, excellent. We then went to Queen's College. In the west, we went then to St. Philip at the Princess Margaret School. We then went on to Dighton Griffith, and now this is our fifth consultation right here in the heart of the city at Harrison College. We're grateful for your participation thus far and for your contributions, which have made these exercises quite rich and rewarding, and certainly very instructive for the members of the ministry who are here taking copious notes. I must let you know from a housekeeping perspective that the restrooms are, I'll be reminded by my team now, just in case I misdirect you, the restrooms are at the back of the auditorium. And so I believe you'll exit at the back, and you come around to the side of the building, And the restrooms, indeed, they're not around this side, of course. Why would you go around there? You'll exit through the back door, and the restrooms are immediately across the pathway, right in front of you. That is where you will go if you do need to relieve yourself in that manner. You will not be going around to the side of the building into the dark and getting lost. We wouldn't want that for you. I'm grateful that I've had the opportunity since we launched these education proposals at the Lloyd Erskine Sandiford Center some weeks ago to see the fulfillment of the ministry's commitment thereafter to engage in a series of public consultations, giving every Barbadian, just like you and I, the opportunity to give our own input, to make our suggestions and contributions, and certainly raise any concerns that we have, challenges that we foresee, and give our own ideas into the shaping of these education transformation proposals. And that is, I think, the benefit of these consultations, that none of these proposals come to us as final form, but they come in transition where we now have the opportunity to make our own contributions towards shaping them into the future. Let me give you a bit of an overview of how this evening's proceedings will go. We'll start out with a word from the minister, and that'll be followed by an overview of the education transformation proposals led by our Chief Education Officer, Dr. Ramona Archer-Bradshaw. I hope that you're all in possession of two documents. You should have in your hands the Reimagining Education in Barbados booklet. If you have it, just wave it at me. Fantastic. I see about one of you has it. Great. You also have the Reimagining Education in Barbados FAQs. Both of these documents, thank you so much, ma'am, I see you in the back. Thank you for waving it at me. Both of these documents are critical for you as we go through this evening's proposals, because it will not be a lecture by the Chief Education Officer, Dr. Archer-Bradshaw. She'll be giving an overview, and you'll be able to follow along as you utilize these two documents. After she is finished, we'll be transitioning to our consultation segment, the moment you've all been waiting for. Will you have the opportunity to come to the microphone and share your contributions on shaping these education transformation proposals, and I will give you some further directions and housekeeping matters when we come to that segment of our evening. So, to kick off this evening's consultation, I'm pleased to invite the Minister of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, the Honorable Kay McConney.
Thank you, Mr. Saul. Good evening, all. And thank you for taking the time to come out this evening. We have nearly a full house here at Harrison College. And I really am looking forward to the kinds of contributions you will make. What I see in the audience is really heartening for me. I see some people here who are part of the subcommittees that have been set up, made of educators and experts of various types, who are on our various subcommittees. We have assessment subcommittees, we have our audit subcommittees, we have our subcommittees on curriculum, we have our subcommittees on certification, we have various subcommittees on leadership and teacher deployment and transition and etc. And so I really want to first say thank you to a number of the educators and other experts who have volunteered to serve on those subcommittees to help us figure out what is the best how for us to move forward, how we can best do this for Barbados. I also see a number of students here, and I want to thank the students, and I hope that they have come also to make their contributions this evening. We, in fact, have received from the student councils already a 10-point plan on education transformation, and the world that we are creating is a world in which they and their children and their grandchildren will have to live in education, and the input of our young Barbadians, our students now, is critical. And so I say thank you as well. Over the last several consultations, we have had people who have come to make a point, some have come to make a stand, people have come to make comments, people have come to make recommendations on how best. We are taking it all in. Nothing is off record. Nothing is outside of what you should say. say what you need to say, and we will make sure that the rapporteurs that we have in here have captured it. And then there's the opportunity, once these consultations are done, for us to consolidate the feedback that we have received. And this booklet that you have here, which are the proposals, will certainly see its own transformation based on the input that we have collected. We've already identified a number of areas where some adjustments would need to be made, and we want you to continue, because this is your Barbados, this is your education system, and this is the world that you're creating for your children, your great-grandchildren, your neighbors, your nieces, your nephews, and all of us have to live in this Barbados together. And so I say to all of you, please come give us generously of your comments, and we look forward to building an amazing education system together, because the best of education is ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister McConney. I neglected to mention this earlier. Minister McConney mentioned it as she began. My name is Raphael Saul, in case you didn't know, and I'm honored to serve as your host for this evening's consultation, as I've had the pleasure of doing on a few previous occasions. I must also welcome and acknowledge those who have been joining us consistently online. In fact, I've met many of you offline, and you've indicated that you've been joining each consultation virtually by stream, and so good night to you. Thank you so much for being here. And I also must acknowledge the presence of our sign language interpreters this evening, Chanel Brathwaite and Bonnie Leonce. Thank you so much for your wonderful committed service. I'm pleased to invite now the Chief Education Officer, Dr. Ramona Archer-Bradshaw, to provide the overview of the education transformation proposals.
Good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure to see so many of you here this evening. You can't hear me? Is this better? Good. I said good evening, everyone. Yes, it's very good to see so many of you here this evening. I want to reiterate what Mr. Saul said. I'm not here to give a long lecture this evening. We want to hear from you. This is our 5th consultation now, and I'm sure that many of you have read the booklet by now, or you have read the document. So I'll be very brief in this presentation and give you the floor so you can raise your questions, so you can make your recommendations, so that we can co-create together. This is what these consultations are about, co-creating together. So I am having a little difficulty here with my prompting screen. All right, so we had consultations from last year, July, with members of the unions. We had consultations with members of the Principals Association, the National Council of Parent-Teacher Associations, persons from Future Barbados, the representative from NUPW, and we spoke about what were some of the things that could constitute a good education system. Further to that, we took that framework to our principals, our teachers, our students. We shared with parents once again, and now we're bringing it to you. And what we found was that we needed to build an education system that gives every child a fighting chance at a bright future, one that teaches each child the way that he or she learns best, one that inspires all of our children to excel and to achieve, and one that produces Barbadian citizens who can compete and do well anywhere in the world. At the end of the day, we want to create a system that is built on a firm foundation, one that is fair, inclusive, relevant, and modern, because we want to produce a global citizen that is rooted in Bajan values. Those citizens are the kinds that are self-confident, productive, adaptive, problem solvers, resilient, those persons with character. So as we speak about the education system that we envision, you'll realize that it is about creating that kind of citizen. We need to have a country that is not only dependent on tourism, but one that is globally competitive. We have to ensure that our children have the distinctive competencies and the confidence to make our country, Barbados, competitive. The problem is that our system as currently configured is not adding value as it should. And that was a refrain each time we had consultations with our teachers, our parents, our students. The system is not adding value as it should. Every year, we spend a significant amount of money educating our children. So for those of you who think that it's free, education isn't free, it costs quite a lot. But when we look at the returns are not what they should be. At the end of the day, when we looked at the pre-primary, the primary, and the secondary level, we said that there were 8 things to consider. At each level, there must be mastery of competencies. This means that when the teacher is in the classroom teaching the subject, there must also be a strong focus on teaching the child to make sure that the child understands, the child can apply, the child can synthesize and evaluate, they can create, they can produce the kind of person who is skilled and who meets the standard at every level. Social and emotional learning must be taught at each level. Our children must know values. They must know about conflict resolution. They should know what it means to share. All of those things that make us inherently Bajan, they should understand. So at every level, we should have social and emotional learning. Performance standards at each level. Every teacher, every parent, every student must be clear in his or her mind about what the content is that is to be taught and to be learned. They should know what attitudes should be taught and what skills should be taught. And they must also know about global citizenship. What does it mean to be a person functioning not only in this Barbados, but in this world? At every level, we are pushing and we are proposing and promoting continuous assessment. We found that very often teachers are pressured to get their children to perform, not to meet the standard, but to pass the 11+ exam. And that starts from the pre-primary level. The 11+ exam is a paper-pencil test, as we all know. The children do the mathematics, they do the English, the grammar, the composition. And at the end of the day, that exam determines the student's placement. What we are looking at introducing, what we are proposing, is that at every level, the child is allowed to demonstrate his or her competencies in various ways on a continuous basis. We're also looking at early screening and diagnostic assessment. We spoke about finding out what students know, what they're able to do before coming into school. Not only that, but we have to test the speech, the hearing, and the sight so that we can address those hindrances to learning in a meaningful way. Thank you. We also spoke about the functional foreign language. Children at very young ages are ready to learn. Learn all the good, learn all the bad. You have to keep it real. So, because their minds are so open, when they're young, when they're at pre-primary level, it would be good, we thought, to propose a functional foreign language, teaching the child Spanish or Chinese, some language, not to write it, but to speak it, so that when a child hears hola, the child knows how to respond, okay? And that will form a foundation for when they move through school. And the introduction of student profiles. At the earliest stage, we are proposing that the teacher has a document that shows the child's capabilities, interests, skills, the challenges that each child is having, so that that document can pass from level to level to level. A child in reception will have this document, and that will go on to infants A, and each time the teacher will write on it, they will see how the child is improving, and the child too can see how he or she is improving. The parent can see as well. Okay, so we spoke about student profiles all the way from reception to 16 years old. At the pre-primary level, we are proposing universal education for 3 to 5 year olds. At present, our system says that children between 5 to 16 years old should have a basic education. We are proposing now that we lower the age to 3. What is the reason for that? We have 3-year-olds who are in daycare. We also have 3-year-olds who are accessing what we call nursery school, like the Maria Holder Nursery School, or they go to various nursery units. What we want to ensure is that all children between 3 to 5 years old have a standardized education, where teachers who are trained to deliver that education are there to deliver the education because they're trained in it. With that, we are proposing the play-based curriculum. Now, I know when some persons hear play, they think, well, the children, they're just playing around, they're not going to learn anything, but research has shown that structured play, where objectives are outlined, where methods, learning methods and teaching methods are clear and distinct in the teacher's mind, can cause children to achieve. At the primary level, we are proposing the project-based approach. In this approach, we want children to collaborate with one another, communicate, critically think, because they will be given real problems. In life, we solve real problems. We don't have a mathematics problem in life or a science problem in life. We might have a huge problem that has elements of math, elements of science, elements of business, elements of foreign language. So we want our children to see the interconnectivity between and among subjects. That is what we are proposing. And individualized education plans for those children who are gifted, as well as for those children who are experiencing challenges in their learning. At the secondary level, we are looking at a new way of transferring children from the primary to the secondary level. We were looking at the feeder catchment school model, with a built-in appellate mechanism. We are proposing 2 new schools, a 2-tiered structure, which has the junior colleges of excellence and the senior colleges of excellence. We want to enhance system and school leadership because we realize there are some large gaps there. We also want to build capacity at Erdiston Teachers Training College because the tutors there need to know how to train their teachers and our teachers so that our teachers can be more impactful in the classroom. We are proposing the Teaching Service Commission because we realize there's a need to deal with matters related to teachers in a speedy fashion. The way it is now, all matters related to the public service go through the Public Service Commission, teachers included. We want to be able to address matters affecting teachers and matters affecting our students ultimately, quickly, efficiently, and effectively. We're proposing the Master Teacher Track, parental education programs, and partnerships. So we have here a proposed roadmap, 2023 to 2025. It shows the proposed journey. So we had our consultations May to October 2023. These are our in-depth consultations with the parties that I mentioned earlier. We've begun our professional training with education officers and some principals, tutors from Erdiston as well. We are having our public consultations now, and I want to reiterate that they are indeed consultations. You are not going to agree with everything that we have in here, and we don't mind that. That's fine. We want to hear what you have to offer. We also want to hear your suggestions. So if you don't agree, you can tell us why you don't agree, and then you can possibly give us a suggestion on how we can improve and co-create. We are not married to this. I want to make that very clear. So, based on the previous consultations, I want to assure you that we've already begun discussion. Minister mentioned it, about things that we are likely to change. It means that the final document that will go to Cabinet will look, I'm not even going to say may look, it will look different to what we have here or what you have in your hands at this time, because we are listening to you. Now, we want to send the document to Cabinet in January next year for their approval. The finalized audit, I understand we will get that report in February. At present, we have some preliminary results, and we are proposing implementation of the education transformation policy in 2025. And that's a proposal as well. So with that, a very brief presentation, I hope not a long lecture. I want to hear from the parents and the public.
Thank you so much, our Chief Education Officer, Dr. Ramona Archer-Bradshaw, for that global overview of the education transformation proposals as currently contemplated and structured. And as she mentioned, as we've gone from consultation to consultation, we've had some very rich feedback, much of which is already under consideration for inclusion, and we are certain that we'll get some valuable inputs tonight as well. So I'll take this opportunity just to set some context around the segment we're about to go into, where you'll have the opportunity to make your contributions, to make your suggestions, to share your ideas as it relates to these education transformation proposals. So I need to head off one or two things to ensure we're able to maximize our time together this evening. Firstly, if you've left home with your book or your product and it's your intention to sell or promote that this evening, unfortunately, I'm not in a position to allow you time to do so, as good as that book or that program may be. And so I must invite you then to anchor your contributions either as a rebuttal to, or a response to, or an expansion of, or perhaps a completely different angle of looking at the proposals as they've currently been presented. So please don't think me rude if I need to cut you short should you go down that route. Secondly, as much as we have quite a significant audience here this evening, it is my role to ensure that as many people as possible have the opportunity to make their contributions. As such, you'll notice that when you come to the microphone, there will be a timer that gives you 3 minutes to make your contribution. The reason why we have that timer there is not to browbeat you or to make you feel as though your contributions are not valuable, far from. But in fact, quite the opposite. We want to ensure that we have the opportunity to hear from as many of you as possible, bearing in mind that none of us is prepared to sleep here this evening. Therefore, I want to invite you, please, to be mindful of that timer that will come up on screen when you do begin your presentations. Now, I know us as Bajans, we are good students. And many of us, just as we do for the call-in programs, may have prepared long presentations. And it's your intention to give us those 10 pages of thesis this evening. Unfortunately, I may have to invite you to shift your intent and deliver that presentation to the email address that has been set up for the reception of exactly that, your full submissions and presentations. You may only be able in that 3 minutes to give your top lines, your headlines, the Cliff Notes version, the précis approach. But we are welcoming and inviting you to give us your full submissions, utilizing the email address at the back of your programs. It is info@educationtransformationunit@school.edu.bb. It should be up on screen. And for those of you who are watching us online by stream, you are invited to do so as well. I'm instructed that later this evening, we're also going to be receiving some questions from our online audience watching by stream, and so we're looking forward to hearing from you also. Are we all on the same page? We are. Thank you so much in advance for your wonderful cooperation this evening. And should I need to, I'm happy to work with you and assist you in ensuring that we're able to keep your contributions succinct and that we provide an adequate opportunity for the Chief Education Officer or any of the members of the head table to respond to those questions. And with that, as I've said to you earlier, the microphones are set up to my left and my right, and there also is a bench behind those microphones, as I mentioned to you, because we know you may want to line up in advance to ensure you get to make your contribution. Now you get to line up in a seated fashion as you wait to go to the microphone so that you can rest in comfort as you wait your turn. The floor is open, ladies and gentlemen, and I am happy and eager to receive your contributions this evening, as all the members of the panel, I am sure, are. I see a gentleman sitting at the bench already to my right. I am not certain if he's there because that was his chosen seat, or if he'd like to go first in leading off our contributions this evening. As you are well within your right to do, sir. Thank you so much. And so I'm happy to invite, I see our first contributor, Miss Bonnie Leonce, who is... I am interpreting. Ah, I see. So Bonnie's here to interpret for, if I know this young man correctly, it's Lionel? Smith, yes. Yes, Lionel Smith, who has a contribution to make. I believe it's connected with the community of deaf persons, yes. Please go right ahead.
Hi, good evening. My name is Lionel Smith, and I'm deaf. There are a few things that I wanted to draw to your attention, so just give me a second because I have an interpreter with me.
Definitely.
There are a few things that I want to point out. The first thing is I watched the video at the beginning, at the opening of this program. I was watching what came up, and I was watching what was there. And I looked at the screen, and I was excited when I saw a deaf person up there on the screen. But then I was like, wait, that deaf person is not expressing themselves how they want to express themselves, because hearing children are able to express themselves a certain way, and deaf people are not allowed that. If you have a teacher there, if you have a teacher giving a script, if you have a teacher that is there, telling them, giving them ideas and pointers about what to say, that's not what should happen. And I think that's an issue, one of the issues that I have with the Irving Wilson School. But I want to ask you a question. What are your plans for Irving Wilson? I literally grew up in that school. I've been there for many years. And I want to know, what do you have planned for them? I finished at 18, and at 18, we were just thrown out there, and now we are here. What is this transformation going to do for us? What is Irving Wilson going to look like? It's like a primary school, but we leave at 18. It's not like we have the opportunity to go to secondary schools as we see them. I have a brother and sister. I have siblings. My sister went to Springer, and my brother went to Dighton Griffith. And I learned from both of them. I had to look at what they were doing and what they were studying, and that didn't look like my curriculum. That is nothing like what I studied. And I was like, I want that. I want that. They're learning different things. They're learning Spanish. They're learning so many different things. Why aren't they teaching us that at Irving Wilson? And, we end up teaching the teachers themselves. And, people look and say, okay, you're having an education. And I'm like, but our children are smart, but we are not seeing how smart they are.
It looks as though he was making one final point, and I'll allow him to go ahead.
Okay, so I remember in 2000, I think that was EduTech, I was at the school, and I had a really great teacher. And I know one of my friends who was there, Miss Worrell. Now she's married and she's left, we would see each other and we would try to have a conversation. But what I was saying before 2000 and what we used to do, we used to cook, we used to do so many different things. We used to learn so many different things. But now it seems like, everything has changed, and even the signing, you're looking at people signing and you're not understanding what they're signing. Even the children aren't understanding what is being signed. And it would be good if people within the deaf community would be able to have the opportunity to help and teach those younger deaf children that are there so that they will understand the language better. We will be willing to roll up our sleeves and work and show them and really teach them. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lionel. And you hang on right there, because I want to give the chief an opportunity to respond to you. And let me say this, ladies and gentlemen, I've taken that timer on me, because I think that both fairness and inclusion require that we allow the additional time for Lionel through the interpreter to make their points. And so you notice that the timer did not come up. It will come up for you. But I'm giving a fair opportunity, I think, in this instance, for Lionel through the interpreter to go right ahead. Madam Chief, I'm going to hand to you at this point.
Okay. Thank you very much, Lionel. I'm very touched by your contribution. You've made some very valid points. One of the issues that we have right now in our system is that we don't have enough persons like Bonnie Leonce with the quality of education in teaching the hearing impaired or signing for the hearing impaired. You can hear me? Yeah, the deaf. Thank you. The deaf. I remembered being in discussion with the same Bonnie Leonce. We were discussing ensuring our program that we could implement to ensure that persons who endeavor to learn sign language, learn the correct sign language. It is something that is on the cards in terms of the proposal, because in order for teachers to teach the deaf any subject, they must be able to sign correctly or sign in a way that the deaf can understand. So teacher training is critical, and we are exploring that. I agree with you, Lionel, when you said that deaf children should have an opportunity to express themselves. That is what we're trying to do when we speak about creating a bright future for every child. The children at the Irving Wilson should be exposed to a similar curriculum to the children in other schools. You should be exposed to the core and any elective of your choice. So we will make sure in the spirit of inclusion, that when we look at the programming across the basic education system, that we include Irving Wilson and look at the curriculum offerings there as well. I welcome the opportunity for persons who are deaf to go into schools to mentor children who are in a similar position, not only to teach them content, but to show the children that there is a future for them. There is a future for them in terms of giving back. One of the things we also have to consider is a kind of a bridging program where the older children who are deaf have opportunities to work in businesses. So there should be job attachments happening at Irving Wilson at an early stage so that they can continue on. So you've made very, very valid points, and we will make sure moving forward that inclusion is always in the forefront of our minds. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Chief, and thank you, Lionel. Thank you so much, Bonnie. One more?
Yeah.
The approach I intended to take was to go left to right, but is it okay? Yeah. Yes? Okay. So I'll come over to my right and take a question from this section, and then we go back over to the left to have our next contribution. So can the person in line on this side of the room? I believe it's the Harrison College student? Yes. Come on up. Yeah, please. You can turn that microphone right down. Go for it.
Okay, hi, my name's Storm Husbands. I'm an upper sixth student of Harrison College. I believe one of the main flaws in this reform is the neglect of students whose career choices or academic interests really, don't solely fall in one area. In my journey specifically with university, I've noticed a dichotomy of requirements specifically for my subject choice of psychology. UK schools take a more scientific approach, whereas American ones focus heavily on the social aspect. So multiple courses of study are clearly still relevant. This isn't a case of me picking subjects badly or not having a cemented choice. I simply can't be globally competitive without both of these aspects. In response to this, the FAQ's pamphlet states that students can register using the majors and minors system, but when a subject needs writing and research equally as well as scientific and statistical skills, I'm quite literally stretched between two worlds with one foot in one door and the other in another. So which crucial aspect of my career would I have to forego? Would it be science or society? I've wanted to pursue this since 11, but think about the students who don't know at that age. We stress a bright future for every child, but really, what about them? Furthermore, even though these documents suggest career guidance to be given at the junior colleges of excellence, children's interests, abilities, and talents are so incredibly dynamic and even ephemeral at that age. So I ask this. Are we really expecting students to decide their careers, the next 30 to 40 years of their lives, as just a young teenager, essentially? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution. If you'd like to, you can stay in place while we have Mr. Luke, who I think is going to respond, and any other members of the table who may want to respond as well. Thank you. You did well.
Thank you so much for your question. one of the things that we've tried to build into our proposals is the idea of flexibility. So you would have referred to taking particular courses and having the ability to take other courses at other senior colleges of excellence. This is part of the built-in flexibility and will allow you to choose widely, but also look specifically. Once you have decided, as you have already decided on the psychology track, you've done your research, as some students and parents do, and thus you can make informed decisions about your areas of interest, even if those areas of interest do not directly fall within your career pathway or your chosen career pathway. They may be part of your general interests. And we're proposing to reward your general interests as well with the modular nature of courses, the ability to have credits in whatever courses that you are attempting to take. You would have mentioned the area of career guidance. What about those students who have not decided what they want to be? Many people have not decided what they want to be. Even adults at my age are still not sure. And that's okay, and that's one of the reasons why we've built into the system. The Junior Academies of Excellence will have a broad-based curriculum, much more exposure to a lot of different areas than they're currently exposed to. The idea is you may not know if you're interested in something if you have absolutely no exposure to it at all. One of the challenges, as you would know, is at some schools you start to choose from third form, at some schools you start to choose from second. In some schools you have to make choices from first form. You have to decide if you're doing French or Spanish or whatever. You have to choose a language. And in this way, having a broad-based curriculum will allow you students to have exposure to many more things, and we're hoping that many more students will then have a general idea as they build up their profiles. Chief talked about profile building from primary school. Well, that will continue on throughout the system so that a student can build up their profile of mastery in every single area that they choose to as they move along.
Thank you, Mr. Luke. Did you have a final thought? Because you did leave about 30 seconds or so on your timer. Any final thought you wanted to share, or no?
Not really. I mean, I understand the point. I just think the aspect of choice. I mean, French or Spanish is not comparable to what will I build my life on, really. So I think that that choice in of itself to have students make at such a young age is just, I don't think it works. I'm sorry.
Your point is well made. Your point is well made. Thank you so much for that contribution. And shout out to all the students who are here as well. Oh, I'm sorry, Bonnie, just before you begin, Mr. Jackman from the Barbados Association of Principals of Public Primary Schools wanted to make a response to your question. You can stay seated, it's fine.
I have to join with Mr. Luke here. As an administrator, I am faced with the limited resources in a school, and I'm faced with having to direct children from as early as third form into a set of subjects that is going to take them in a particular path. I know what it was for me. I went through school as a science student. I ended up with a social science degree and finally a master's in education. So I touched 3 faculties at Cave Hill. I had the opportunity to do that because of what Barbados education is. But we now have such a packed curriculum that our young people don't have that opportunity and they find themselves pigeonholed very early. We have attempted to fix it by changing from course outlines to options and a child picking something from here and picking something from there, but that itself is limited. And that is why when we had this discussion, we said we're going to have to make the third form curriculum, the junior college curriculum, as broad-based as possible. We're going to have to make it modular so that you complete a module and you have a set of knowledge and you move on to another module, as opposed to this building block thing that we do now, that you do a little bit of Spanish in second form, and then you do a little bit of Spanish in third form, and then you build on that. We have to change that approach. We have to design courses that you get all the knowledge one time in the module, you can store that knowledge, you can use it, and you can move on to a new module.
Thank you, Mr. Jackman. Thank you very much. I'll move over to my left now We have another contributor who's being assisted by Bonnie.
Hold it for him so he can see. Hi, good evening to everyone. My name is Dario. My surname is Nightingale. So I have a list of things, but I'm going to pick the most important ones and just summarize them. So I will begin with the first one. I looked through the book that we were given, and there are a few things that I see that were missing. One of the things was sign language. I want to offer some ideas. Maybe you can have a QR code, and we could have accessed that, and we would have been able to see an interpreter on that once we scanned that QR code, and we would have been able to see that in sign language so that the deaf community would have been able to access this booklet more, and it would have been able to break down the points better for us. So that's just a suggestion. Okay, so one of the things I want to talk about was the Irving Wilson School and how we compare it to to hearing primary and secondary schools. There are deaf children who have cochlear implants who have had the opportunity to be mainstreamed into those primary or secondary schools, and they learn a lot. They feel more comfortable, and the communication is so much better. They're able to, they know their signs, and then, they can dream. Their sense of self-identity is really actualized when you see so much, when they see so many opportunities, and they grow up. And, if more deaf children, if we had the opportunity to really, really mix and mingle with hearing children in primary and secondary schools, it would really make our lives so much easier. We'll be able to feel a sense of pride. We'll be able to feel a sense of worth. We'll be able to just know that we're able to dream. When you go into Irving Wilson, the buck practically stops there. So I have a question that I want to pose to you. What are the qualifications for hiring a teacher at the Irving Wilson School? That's the question.
I think we can pause to have it responded to.
I was going to call on my Deputy Chief Education Officer with responsibility for schools. So I'll let her speak with you there.
So good evening, all. Generally, the qualifications would be the basic qualifications for teachers. But for the Irving Wilson School, we're trying to look for persons who can sign. And because we know we have a mixture of individuals at that school, we would have persons who are hearing impaired, persons who are autistic, and persons who are visually impaired. So we tend to look for qualifications for persons who will be able to teach those individuals, persons who might have the ability to transpose, if that's the right word, into Braille, and also to assist the students there at the school. So those are the basic qualifications that we do seek.
Okay, but what we're seeing as far as the signing is not good enough. Yeah. When people are applying for a job, any other job, and you look at the skill set that they have and the different qualifications that they have, and one of the things should be, if you understand members of the deaf community, if you understand the language, the sign language that we use, what you see a lot at Irving Wilson is what we call SEE, Sign Exact English, and it's really important to be able to teach deaf children in a way that they'll understand, because English and sign language are not the same. They're grammatically separate, two separate languages. I remember in the past, we've been involved in NIFCA, and we won awards in NIFCA. I remember a teacher, a really, really good teacher, who taught us, music and how to dance and drama, and it really encouraged us and really supported us and supported the deaf children. Even when they became deaf adults, they'll be willing to support deaf people. That's who we want. We want people who are able to support the deaf community regardless, not just put someone in a school until their age of retirement, but people who value and understand the value and importance of sign language. Not people who sign with no facial expressions, their body language is dead, and they want to encourage and they want to inspire a generation. And that's not going to happen. We want our deaf children to become successful. And that's why we would like that there is more inclusion of deaf children into hearing primary and secondary schools so that they will have access and improvement. And the last point is when babies are born at QEH. We wait so long for their hearing to be tested, but when babies are born, their hearing should be tested right there and then. And then, once it's tested, you should be able to then know how to work and how to improve the life of that deaf child. That deaf child should be seeing signs. If they're born deaf, they should be seeing signs, just like how you teach a hearing baby. You're talking to a hearing baby, and so when they grow up and they develop, they'll be able to learn more because they would have had their first language, which is sign language. So when you start from a baby, it's important. So testing at an early age is better, and it helps them. It helps their mind. It helps them. The parents are proud of them, and that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much for, and I'd have to say, two very moving contributions, and it forces us to ensure we continue to be mindful. Thank you very much, and thank you for the support as always, Bonnie. I'll come over, as I had done before, to my right. So the next contributor on this side, feel free to come to the microphone and go right ahead. You can just tilt it down if you want to leave it.
Hi, good night, everyone. My name is Natasha Gray. I'm a proponent for literacy and reading, and I believe in the science of reading. And I have some concerns as to the approach that when children are screened at the very beginning as they enter school, what type of interventions are going to be put in place for these children. Structured literacy, I heard a couple people mention in some of the previous meetings, explicit learning and teaching, but that all falls under structured literacy, and which is a whole bunch of different components that we need in order for children to learn. So the science of reading, structured literacy are all evidence-based, and I would like to know if this will be part of your intervention plan when you are screening children, when you have identified those who are at risk, and I really just want to know what those interventions would really look like. The gentleman over there, I'm not sure of his name, Lionel, he mentioned from the time a child is born, they really need to have certain checks. So reading actually starts in utero, okay? So before they're even born. So, and the science have proven this, and it's really important that we look at things like the protective factors from the home, genetics, understand what's happening in the home, because when these children leave the school, they go into a home. Is there the literacy level of the parents, where are they at? I have some concerns about what that would look like. At one of your meetings, you had a young boy, his name was Jacob Mon. I did his assessment, and we struggled with trying to find the right intervention for him, even trying to implement the IEP, because there were no sources, there were no resources, and hence the reason he was admitted to Mensa. However, he lives in Barbados. So that is a challenge. He will get some intervention, however, it's not going to be the full spectrum of what he really truly needs. So I want to also know, what are you going to put in place as it relates to children who are neurodiverse, who have dyslexia, dysgraphia, autism, ADHD. I really want to know how, because that's a huge population and the gap is extremely wide, and I just want to know what you're going to put in place.
Thank you so much. So just to narrow down those 2 points, you can stay.
Okay.
It was first the interventions as it relates to reading, and the second one at the end related to the neurodiverse children and what approaches will be in place for them.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
Thank you so much. I'll pass those questions on.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your question, Natasha. We spoke about the early diagnostic testing when it comes to children going into pre-primary, because we need to know what deficits they have in order to address them. In terms of reading, you want to know the kind of intervention, whether we're going to look at structured reading. As I mentioned in during the last consultation, we have a group of people working on the interventions for these children who will be having difficulty. I have here again my education officer, Janelle Little, who will be able to share a bit more, because I know she's had several meetings with the team. She met with the head of the task force quite recently, so she'll be able to share with you what they're proposing.
Well, before you say anything, I looked in the book and I just want to clarify the word diagnostic, because you say universal screening. Universal screening is meant to be when a child enters the school and you determine whether they're at risk. And then they go on to a diagnostic test, but it wasn't like that. It's not written like that in the book. It says diagnostic test. It doesn't include screening, which should come before a diagnostic test. So I just wanted to know, I just want some clarity on that as well.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
As the chief would have mentioned, we are having a task force on literacy. And before we answer those questions, as you rightly said, we need to know what is a true picture of literacy in Barbados. So we do have to have those screeners, and we do have to have those diagnostic tests. When those diagnostic tests are done across the Barbadian primary schools in Barbados, then we will have a clear idea as to the strengths and weaknesses of the students in Barbados. So I agree with you that once we have an idea of what the scale of literacy is, what the challenges are, we have to take an evidence-based approach. And I agree with you that we need to take a structured literacy approach, because the structured literacy approach is an evidence-based approach. Yeah. And we recognize that a lot of the foundational skills of our children are missing. And as this is a 5th consultation, we have heard persons speak about the challenges of literacy in every single consultation. So we know that it is a growing societal concern, and we are taking it seriously. So we are taking aboard we are planning to have those tests, and I will say diagnostic tests, so we can have a more in-depth, comprehensive picture of what's going on. And we will look at the various approaches so that we can make sure that as we go forward, we are filling in the cracks. We are actually putting the plasters for the sores that we find. All right? So that is the plan. And I agree with you also that we need to tackle parental involvement. We also have to tackle parental literacy, because in the home, whatever we do in the school needs to be supported in the home. So we will be tackling parental literacy. We will also be looking at reinforcing the skills of the teachers, because we know that even as we tackle what's happening at home, we need to ensure that the teachers, they also have strong pedagogy, so that when the children go to Bailey's or they go to Wesley Hall, wherever they go, we need to ensure that everyone receives instruction that is across the board, standardized across the board, because we want all of our children to be literate. We want their foundation in literacy to be firm. We also want to engage the private sector, the public sector, to build out reading clubs, to build out community-based activities, because we know the children are not in school all the time. So we want to make sure that we have a multi-pronged approach in order to increase the literacy of the children in Barbados, because we want our children to be fully, functionally literate in Barbados. The last thing I will say is that we are also going to be looking at a multi-tiered system, because not all children read at the same rate. We believe that all children can read. A bright future for every child means every child can read. We believe that. They're not all going to read at the same rate, so we have to build in that support in the system. So that's what we're also going to be looking at, intensive intervention and the Tier 1 intervention, so that all children can receive the help that they need.
Thank you very much, Ms. Little. I want to create the opportunity for the head table to respond to the second question that was raised, keeping us honest. That was as it relates to the neurodiverse. I hope I'm using the correct term here. Forgive me if I am not. The neurodiverse children, and what provisions or accommodations will be made for them.
Right. So on this committee, we have persons who are from the student support services as well. And we recognize that sometimes when children aren't able to read, it might be because they may have dyslexia or some other problem. So this task force does not only have those persons who are well-versed in literacy, it has persons who are versed in special needs. So we'll be doing a full screening and diagnostic assessment so we can determine and create the proper interventions for the children.
Thank you very much, Madam Chief. Dr. Rudder, yes, go ahead.
I just want to make a point as it relates...
Dr. Rudder, if you can bring the microphone just closer to your mouth, please.
I wish to make the point in relation to the gifted and talented and exceptional children. As a country, we have evolved over time where for many decades, children with special needs were hidden away. They were not given the opportunities, and over time we have been building out opportunities for children with various special needs, but the gifted. And I believe that we now are in a position where we have to look at investing heavily in providing a new opportunity for gifted and talented children and children with exceptionalities. And this is where we can provide, for example, in terms of a futuristic concept, learning laboratories for the gifted children. We have, for example, Jacob, whose IQ is quite high. And why should Jacob be frustrated by having to sit in a regular classroom, as opposed to having a purpose-built facility where he can be challenged to demonstrate his prowess and his genius in a learning laboratory kind of framework, or we can call it a learning incubator for gifted and talented and exceptional children. And that is the kind of thinking that we have to engage in now, where we are providing those opportunities at the other end of the spectrum for those children, so that they too can be seen in years to come as the Mozarts and the Beethovens and the, those persons we've learnt about in history who were known to be gifted. We can produce them here. We have some here already. What we have to do is to create the learning environment that will continuously challenge them and not place stumbling blocks or hurdles in their way. So, for example, if young Jacob is ready to move on to a new level at age 7, which places him at the level of, let's say, our junior college of excellence, why should we hold him back? We have to find a way to allow the gifted and talented children to explore their universe and to support them all the way and to promote them as Barbadians, rather than they having to leave our shores and go elsewhere to be recognized. And I think that some level of investment, working in partnership with either the private sector or other philanthropists, can assist the government of Barbados in setting up the kind of facilities that can accommodate these types of children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rudder. Point well made. We have received a comment from one of our online viewers. I believe that comment is going to be brought up on screen just before we head to the next question. And the comment from our online viewer is, my concern relates to the ministry's very optimistic implementation date without real indicators of readiness, especially as it relates to children on the autism spectrum. I suspect the latter part of that, as it relates to children on the spectrum, may have been addressed somewhat just now, but the first question about the implementation date. Madam Chief?
Thank you very much for the question. The date is a proposal. It is subject to change. We were put in a position where we dreamt, or where we had to dream, and we dreamt. We know what we would like to see in terms of programs, in terms of teacher quality, leadership quality, infrastructure, in terms of the legislative framework, and we put those ideas out there. We know when we would like to see it by 2025. Now, after all of the discussion, all of the audit, and we have to go back to the drawing board and we have to review the date, we're open to that. So I'm very thankful for the question because it helps me to make clear that the 2025 date is a proposal. It can be shifted, okay? So that's it, Mr. Saul.
Thank you very much, Madam Chief. I'll come over to my left, your right at this time, for our next question on this side. Yes, sir. Let's start with your name and then go right ahead, please.
A blessed good evening to everyone. My name is Rodney Holder, and it is an honor to be here to share my piece here with the audience.
Give us your piece by just raising that microphone up slightly.
Yes, please.
Go right ahead now, please. Thank you.
I'm listening to the whole aspect of moving forward. It is very good. The country should be behind it. But for me, I got some issues I can raise quickly.
Go ahead.
Yes, please. The reason why we got to change this system is because of failure of the other system. Why was there failure? Rectifying it. To me, going forward, doing this project is like going to build a new house on an old spot where the first house was eaten down by termites. We need to deal with that first before we build again. And saying that, I can start with number one, ill-discipline, deviant behavior, lateness, absenteeism in the schools. That's the issues that got to get addressed. PSV nuisances, engaging children in lawless behavior, drugs, new drugs coming in the island. We got to let the children know what these drugs is. Social media, too much distractions. They're using the social media for bullying purposes. AI technology, the children can misuse it for cheating purposes. The ministry got to be one step ahead of that. School environments, climate change affecting it. Children can't learn in a classroom if it's too hot. No, nothing like that. These are things you need to carry out surveys for the children. Lack of maintenance and upgrades need to be done on the schools. You ain't doing these things, how you can build 2 more fresh schools where we ain't get there yet. Staff, working conditions for the staff and lower morale. Honestly, my heart pours out to the teachers of this country. I had to babysit 4 little children, and God knows I could have picked up my hair. You know what's the deal with 28 or 32? I admire them. Them caring for the children. We need to support the children and the teachers. And to me, the aspect of we left in everything for the school to do, no, it starts at home. Parents got to step up the game in this country to get behind a movement like this. But going forward, we can't put, like Madam said, just no dreaming and then turn around and put money behind dreaming too. We got to deal with reality until we can counteract the ills plague in this last system. It will creep like a cancer into the new one. Address these issues first. That is the main thing. Once these issues start to get addressed in a nutshell, we can move forward. Any investment, any other thing, let me get there. Setting that aside, deal with the hearing impaired, the autism, put them first. But past that, deal with the others and secure it that we, as a country, can move forward. We can't look at it as children anymore. Future. Future, future. Dairy future, there is what we got to invest in. And not to kill it. My opinion is if we got to spend $2 billion to make sure that this lady here could go and do studies to become one of the greatest engineers the world ever see, we need to be supporting it and we spend our money wisely. Please let us deal with these things. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Points very well made. I'll open it up for any of the members of the head table to respond to any of the points that were raised. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for your comments, Rodney. Thank you so much for your comments. I heard you. You spoke about the ill discipline and the lawlessness and the drugs and all of these things. And that really is where the dreaming comes in. So how are we going to fix it? We have to think. We have to create. How are we going to fix it? When you look at the proposal speaks to social and emotional learning, a heavy emphasis on that. When you speak about drugs, the use of drugs and so on, we, of course, would wish to strengthen our relationship with the police. The police already goes into various schools across the island. Are you aware? They go into various schools across the island and they hold sessions. They talk to children about the consequences of bad behavior, all of these things. We work very closely with them. But of course, we want them to go into more schools.
One of the things is, right, is that the problem is that y'all going to be faced with it, you know? It is resources, manpower. This is when they were asked, there's time for the churches in this country to come out, the volunteer groups to come out. Let me sit down together. Let me think that we could get enough people. A lot of the young children are interacting with the elderly. Let me get the elderly coming, going to the schools. Let me get and talk with them. One more thing, I ain't gonna steal the show, please. In America, you see that they're doing a project with the fathers where they had a school fighting all the time. They decide, like, bringing the dads in here and just let them come in here and just be there. Not an issue, not a problem. I mean, we need to look at other things that may be foreign, but it may actually work.
Excellent point, Corey. And I like the point you made. See, the Ministry of Education can't do it alone. We need the parents on board, the church on board, and that's what we said in the proposal here. It needs to be a whole country effort. You said something about the parents as well, how the parents need to be involved.
Yes, ma'am.
Teaching values. We have to be working hand in hand to make sure that each of our children are successful. Each of our children, okay, good. Now, in terms of the social media, we spoke about the digital literacy that we want to introduce in school. You spoke about AI and how the students can use it for cheating. Digital literacy will help the children to understand the responsible use of AI, like ChatGPT, right? Our teachers also need to be exposed when it comes to digital literacy. How can they use AI in their classroom to help them to teach? Now, when little John comes in with a beautiful essay on my island, Barbados, it might not be little John. It might be ChatGPT. So should the teacher mark little John for the essay alone? Or should the teacher incorporate that and say, little John, how did you get this? And he might say, teacher, I wrote it. Okay, well, tell me, when you're talking about your country, Barbados, what are some of the things that you would like to see? And quiz John there and then look at the oral presentation to see what is coming from John's head. So we are looking at teacher training in that area as well. You spoke about ventilation. As part of the proposal, we had to dream. In terms of, we know that some schools, the Prime Minister speaks about dark, damp, and dismal. Or dark and dismal. We spoke about ensuring that the classrooms are well ventilated, improving the physical infrastructure. You spoke also about teacher morale. Oh, they said that I'm talking too quickly. I'm getting a little passionate, so let me slow down. We spoke about teacher morale. And we spoke about things like the master teacher track. There are some teachers who love to teach, but they want a little bit more money. So you know what they do? They go into leadership. Leadership takes them away from teaching. So these things can boost morale. Things like fixing the school can boost morale. When teachers go to a school and it feels all airy and fresh and...
Once again, to the parents can boost morale. Sometimes you could call a teacher one side and thank them very much. This is manners. I tell you, we as a country, lost where we roots, you know, we's good
Rodney,
people.
I love you.
To like talking good we want.
Rodney, I love you.
We get wayward.
You have to keep it real. That is it. And many of our teachers go into schools every day, and before they can teach the subject, they have to deal with discipline.
Yes, ma'am.
Ill-disciplined children because they're indisciplined from at home. So I'm saying that we all need to work together. We have to stop the finger pointing. Or is the ministry, or is the school, or is the parent. Let us all come together to create the kind of child that we want.
One last point. I can go.
It will have to be a last, Rodney.
This is the last, Rodney.
The last.
Go ahead.
Protection of our children. To me, the laws in this country needs little upgrading to punish people who trouble with little children. We need to protect we children with everything we got. All animals, all species is die protecting the children. We need to protect we children from the predators in this island. When a child comes to school abused or traumatized, that could disrupt a whole classroom. 2 of them in there could offset the rest from learning. So we need to knock this out, find out where, get into the families. Mom, I wish one of the best of luck on one of the endeavors. And may I put God first and it's going to work out. We children is we future once again, and thank you very much.
Rodney, thank you. Thank you so much, Rodney. I'm going to go over to my right in just a second. You can stay. If you'd like, you can stay. There is a comment from our online audience and also a question that I want to take, and then I'll come right to you, ma'am. All right? So here's the comment. Having reviewed the full proposal, I repeat to my call from last week for more statistics, including the full range of 11+ results, not just the failure rate, and the numbers entered for fewer than 5 CXC. So I think that point has been mentioned and duly noted. I'll transition now to the question that we received. What will be the new mode of transferring students from primary school to junior schools of excellence, since the 11+ is to be scrapped?
So we are proposing the feeder school, catchment school system, where feeder schools within a vicinity, children from feeder schools within a vicinity will go to the catchment secondary school in that vicinity. So that is the proposed mechanism. Of course, there will be an appellate process. If a parent wishes to appeal for some reason, we will have a committee that will hear them out. But that is what we are proposing in terms of the transition.
Thank you, Madam Chief. Yes, I believe our next contributor was standing a short while ago. You can come back up to the microphone. And there was a lady who was standing. Oh, I understand. Okay, very well. And I want to thank our contributors thus far for honoring our timelines as much as humanly possible. Helps us to move forward nicely. Yes, sir.
Good evening, everybody. Patrick Frost is the name, former teacher at the Lodge School. First of all, I think we should recognize and appreciate what the committee has done and the booklet they've produced. The sincerity of effort can't be denied. But there are obviously weaknesses in it. Absence of detail, it's vague in many places. There's no reference whatsoever to competitive sport, no reference to the cadet corps, no reference to Girl Guides, no reference to clubs and so on. Not mentioned, perhaps not thought of sufficiently, perhaps implicitly intended, but there are some of us who would like to see it written in black and white. Much of the booklet deals with structure and restructuring. But comparatively speaking, there's greater value in instruction rather than a structure. And therefore, what we have heard about modular approach and so on can be introduced into the secondary school system. It's not mutually exclusive. Which brings me to a question. You have one written down there. Why or what is proposed for these junior colleges? My question is, what is required by way of research or factual reality to make you abandon that proposal? I can give you 2 or 3 reasons why I think it should be abandoned. First of all, the Jesuits have the saying, show me the child for up to the age of 7 and I'll show you the man. Those of us who have organized games or looked after children know it takes a period of time to mold them into the type of citizens or persons we want to have. Minimum of 5 years. If you put children into one of these junior schools, you're automatically going to remove that possibility. Secondly, those children at that age, they don't have older students above them, figures of authority, persons to whom they can look up to, imitate, see how good they are at games, in academic work or whatever. That will be lost on them. You're asking for a level of maturation and a decision in career making by them and their parents at an age when they're far too young. In addition to that, you're putting all people pupils at a particular age group, the age when they're most dangerous to themselves and to others, and you're putting them in the hands of teachers who will have to deal with the discipline and other problems. And there's no longer that interlocking disciplinary structure in school systems or in homes, as we've heard. That is a recipe, in my view, for disaster. Thirdly, if you introduce this structure, you're going to have to shift teachers across the entire system. We've just recently seen the example of what happened with transfer of a few principals and deputy principals, an absolute shambles. We do not have, in my view, the organizational capability and capacity to do some exercise like that smoothly. I can speak personally of knowledge of personnel matters, teachers who've been suspended for 3 years, not a single investigation taking place, nothing done to them. Taxpayers paying for substitutes, and the individuals destroyed as individuals. So don't think that that is something that you can do overnight. Teaching Service Commission, Constitution was amended in 1974. The Teaching Service Commission should have been in existence since September 1975. There's no good reason to wait until September 2025 to have it. It should be there already. Finally, or rather, what I would say finally, if you have a junior section and a senior section, sooner or later there's going to be the temptation to pay those in the senior section more than those in the junior section. My union went on strike for 19 days in 1969 to make sure that the principle of payment of qualifications and experience was the manner in which teachers were paid. We allowed then an institutional edge to the community college just so to make sure that we had a settlement. That agreement has remained in place for 50 years. Don't touch it. Don't have the idea that because you have senior schools and junior schools, that it'll be all plain sailing and they'll be divided. Sooner or later, somebody is going to bring up that question of salary. And I would urge you, at this stage, well, before I close off, spend your time and your focus on the primary schools. Spend your time and your focus at the other end of the secondary school system. Let the schools evolve with their new system of transfer. Let them all come through, doing whatever they can do with as wide a curriculum as possible, and do something about CXE. Put CXE where it belongs, to serve the people of the region and not to serve itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frost. You can have your seat, sir. You raised a number of points, and so I think the members of the head table will want to respond seriatim.
All right, thank you, Most Honorable Frost. All valid points and all valid considerations that we've been making. One of the considerations we've been really thinking about and wrapping our brains about, if we engage in the proposal of having junior colleges of excellence and senior colleges of excellence, is what's to happen in that same situation you talked about, where you will have a lack of seniors at the junior academy and thus a lack of coaching and mentoring and so on that goes on at schools. That is something that we've really been considering. We have been talking peripherally about, for example, cadets and Girl Guides, having senior students, having those senior colleges of excellence have their base not at their own school, but have their base at the junior colleges of excellence, so that there can be that mentorship, so that there can be that transfer of knowledge and so on, where those students in those particular things like Key Club, things like cadets, things like Girl Guides, they can offer that mentorship by having their base of operations, their base of training in the junior colleges of excellence. That is one consideration of proposal. You would have also mentioned, Most Honorable, about the Teaching Service Commission. We are, of course, well on board with that. The framework has been approved, and we're just waiting on that process to start. The payment for qualifications, we had some interventions in earlier, I think we had, starting from Queen's College, where some people would have mentioned things like sixth form colleges as an example. Sixth form colleges is an example of where we have seen throughout the Caribbean that same thing that you've mentioned, where eventually people insist that they be paid more. So as we have looked at things like sixth form colleges, senior colleges of excellence. These are all things that we have been considering along the way as part of the proposals and making adjustments along the way as well.
All right, thank you, Mr. Luke. I know that there is some reservation about the Junior College of Excellence and equating it to what we know as middle schools. I'm going to caution you with regard to equating the two, because what we're proposing is something that is tailor-made to our 11 to 14-year-olds, a kind of program that has a heavy emphasis on teaching those children values, teaching them skills, so that at the end of the third form level, these children would have had a level of exposure that fortifies them to be able to make a decision with regard to areas of specialization. What we are also looking at in the Junior College of Excellence are teachers that are qualified to teach the first to third formers and teachers who want to teach the first to third formers. We are in a system right now where some of our teachers teach across the system, all the way from first to fifth form. There are some teachers in the system who will prefer to teach senior school only, while there are others who will prefer to teach junior school only. So we're giving teachers a choice as well with regard to the level at which they would wish to teach. But I'm concerned when I hear people equating the Junior College of Excellence to the middle school, because what we're proposing is different. It might be the same, it might be similar in structure, but not similar in programming. Junior College of Excellence, we're proposing will have a broad-based curriculum where the children will learn financial literacy, they will learn the digital literacies, they will have the strong career guidance, they will have the strong teachers who will be guiding them. We're looking at a lower teacher-student ratio where at the end of the day, the children come out understanding who they are and having an idea of their place in the world, where they want to go. That's what we're thinking about for the Junior College of Excellence. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I'm hearing a lot about middle schools and the failure of middle schools in the US and how Bermuda wants to move away from the middle schools. All that is correct. But look at what we're proposing to offer in the junior college in terms of programming and in terms of teachers and so on, carefully selecting them, and compare it to where there was failure in Bermuda, well, let's not say Bermuda, in the US, and compare it to the reasons that Bermuda is moving away from it. Just think about it critically, right? I understand your reservations, but I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Madam Chief. I'm going to go to the left and then come back to the right, as I've been doing. So I'll invite our next contributor from my left, your right. I understand we have a packed bench on both sides, so you can feel free to come on up. And please be mindful of your contribution time as you're doing so. Go right ahead, please.
Okay, good evening, panel. Sandy Field-Kelman. I have two quick submissions. I'm going to pack everything into it. I'm speaking, first of all, on educators from the preschool, pre-primary, what y'all call pre-primary. And they have a concern that presently, and even before, a lot of the persons that come and work in these schools are really babysitters. Okay? I run a school like that, and they will go to Earlston, do level 1, level 2, but they are not well-rounded to teach these pre-primary children the basic skills, even to speak to them properly, even to read to them. And a lot of the coloring and the watching of the cartoons on the TV, that is what exists. And I'm speaking on behalf of these educators who teach pre-primary. I taught it, and I would really like to see something done about that. Babysitters, all right? Babysitters, level 1 and level 2 does not say that you can teach my 3-year-old or 4-year-old how to articulate, all right? My own personal submission, and I'm keeping it real tonight, is that I want to see, besides all of this, I read this book about 8 times at Mullins Beach, all right, from cover to cover, all right, when the sea was really rough. And I am not seeing anything speaking about things like soft skills, any of those things entwined in this document. And if we want to produce well-rounded global citizens and global children and global people, we have to start at the pre-primary level. All right? I teach that age group, and I want to let you all know it's real that since this came out, there are 9 preschools that have shut up. Okay? Private schools are on the rise. I deal with them. They're taking their children out of the public school, primary schools, and opening their own schools and putting these children because they call me to ask me for recommendations or references. So I want to let you all know it's a real thing. 9 that I know about, I can take you all on, or give you all the pin to find these schools. The other thing, a lot of these pre-primary schools, I do not know how the Child Care Board passes a lot of these schools and say, oh, you're passed. When you go into these schools, some of these schools, not even as nice as my dog garage. Sorry to say. All right? There are, I really can't believe that children go there at a year old, 2 years old, or 3 years old. Thank God my daughter is grown up already. I'm just saying, right? And what is happening? I homeschool children. Homeschooling is very big in this country. Why? The why is because they're not getting what they're supposed to get in the pre-primary schools. Because what is happening, as Natasha said, a lot of the challenges that they possess, the teacher is not even, she's like from here to Timbuktu with the knowledge. So she or he does not know. And if I have a child at that age and the teacher has her degree in biology, French, geography, etc., and cannot determine or detect or diagnose what is really and truly wrong with that child at that age, we have, big issues. So I just want to leave that there, but I just want to let you all know, John Public, that private schools, pre-primary, are on the rise because of. So that's my submission, Madam.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you. Any member of the panel would wish to respond there?
Oh, I thank Mrs. Kelman for her contribution. I also want to let her know that she can go online. Sandy, you can go online. There is a bigger document. This is not the only document. There is a bigger document that has a lot more detail, so you can read that too, and we would appreciate your feedback on that as well. So thank you.
Sounds like it requires a long visit to the beach to get through. We do have a housekeeping matter. A key has been lost but found. So I'd like you to, I think the driver decided that he wished to leave after the event is finished, and I think it has now been claimed or identified. Just wave at me if it has. Or we're having it audited to determine if the person is driving away. Yes, you got a car. All right. So we do have a question from our online audience before I come back over to my right. That question will come up on screen. What role do you see for the guidance counselors in the transformation?
You want to take that? Roderick, take that.
I'm not sure who will lead off first with that. Dr. Rudder?
Yes, I'll take that. Within the context of the way forward for the transformation, guidance counselors and school counselors and other professionals will have a pivotal role to play, not only as it relates to aspects of career guidance, but we do have a lot of challenges associated with behaviors and mental health and other social and emotional challenges. And hence, we are contemplating an expansion of the provision of these services to ensure that every child who is desirous or in need of appropriate interventions based on assessments can be facilitated. Right now, we work closely with the Ministry of Health and the professionals at the Child Guidance Clinic as well to ensure that where we are unable to provide the additional support by the personnel in the ministry that we are still able to work with our partners in the Ministry of Health as well to provide those services. So the guidance counselors and the other allied professionals will have a very pivotal role to play as we go forward, given the expansion in the various learning, behavioral, and other challenges that we're seeing emerging across our school system. And we have to cater for those persons who find the system to be quite challenging as it relates to meeting their needs. And I go back to those gifted children who could become disruptive, for example, because we're not meeting their needs as well. So we're looking at the entire spectrum, and there is an opportunity for us to provide improved services and interventions for all children who would need those interventions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rudder. Allow me to go over to my right now and invite your question. Yes, ma'am. Please just give us your name and then go right ahead.
Hi, good night. My name is Kellyanne Moore. I'm a parent, obviously a past student of the system, and I also have students that would be in your transformation year in 2025 at both the primary and the secondary level. So I do have a lot of questions. Now, first, I want to thank the committee for realizing that there are deficits within our education system, and obviously the work that you've put in to bring this proposal to us. However, 2 months or 3 before you propose to take it to cabinet, I find it's still a lot of dreaming and not a lot of details on how you plan to get there. And that does not give me any confidence as a parent. When I first sat there, I actually came up with a list of 10 questions based on you speaking and other persons in the audience. I'm still going to list those questions. I guess you'll address them if you can. However, I want to say this. I will say it nicely. I don't agree that we should get rid of the common entrance exam. And I say that on 2 bases. If we're bringing in a new system, it has to be measurable. We have to have something to measure it against to see if it's performing. So, 1, I think we should keep the common entrance exam for those transitioning that would not have had the benefit of your new system with the standardized curriculum, etc. So, and then I also think you should keep it not as an entrance exam, but just to have it there for historical measurement of how schools are performing, how children are performing, and therefore you would know where to address and how to improve, because it would have been constant coming through the years. And then you can just keep it for that reason going forward. Now, I'm going to list my questions.
And is it Kellyanne or Tellian?
Kellyanne.
Kellyanne.
Yes.
So each may not be responded to,
I know.
but I want to invite you to make sure you submit those using the email as well so that they're all in. All right? Thank you.
On a matter of such national importance, why have the consultations be reduced from 13 to 5? Because at the first presentation, it said it would have been 13, and I think it should have been something that should have been given enough ventilation among the public to have those discussions. So that's my first one. Secondly, has any research been done to support what you're now proposing? For example, the moves to a separate junior school. I will not go through it again, but the gentleman spoke before me. A lot of what you're saying you want to do can be incorporated into the same first to third form structures without creating or disrupting the system. So, what are the specific primary goals of this system? We cannot aim for something if we don't know what that goal is. I like the dreams, I like the vision, but what are the specific goals? So if we can have some of those, that would be great, so that we know if we're getting there or where we're off track and where we need to go. Will the final proposal be shared with the public? You say it's a working document, it's changing after each decision, but will that be shared before it goes to cabinet? I'm trying to work through this.
Go ahead.
What are the JCEs versus the SCEs? All of our schools have strengths. All of our schools already have infrastructure. Are we really utilizing our resources properly? Can we even look at possibly how we have 6th form where you can transfer? Can we look at that at a 4th form level if it is that we want to give children as much exposure and as much options without necessarily disrupting the entire system as it is? The move to mixability. We want to get away from streaming, but how is that going to be managed within the primary schools and within the secondary schools where you're still streaming, even if you don't do it at the common entrance level? And are elements of the system dependent when you go to do the transition? So in 2025, what are the details of that transition? What are you bringing in place in 2025? What will follow in subsequent years? And are all factors, and other people spoke to this, are all factors being considered? It's not just common entrance. We're a part of a society. There are a lot of other elements. There's transportation. There's access to something as simple as having a proper meal. Are we looking at addressing all of those when we look at really transforming our education system holistically? And that's my comment.
Thank you so much, Kellyanne. Let me assure you also and remind everyone, we have rapporteurs. If they can just wave at me, they're over to my left, you're right. And they're making sure that all of these comments and contributions are being documented so that none of these questions is lost. So thanks for your contributions. And I believe that the members of the head table may select some of those points to respond to at this time and reserve the opportunity to respond to others in future. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for your questions, Kellyanne. I will deal with the first one. When you said we should keep the common entrance. And we should keep the common entrance. That's what you said, but not as a screening test, but for the teachers to address deficits.
Like for measurement, she said.
National measurement.
As a national measurement.
Yes.
Okay, right.
For admission into a school.
Right. Okay, good. So when we speak about continuous assessment, we are proposing a national continuous assessment so that at about 3 stages at the primary level, we know how our children are performing, not for placement at the class 4, but so that when the child transitions from the primary school to the secondary school, the teacher can intervene to assist the child. That's what you're talking about. So you're on board with that? No, go back to the mic. I think you gotta go back to the mic. Because I want to be clear about what you're saying.
My point specifically is that you can use it to serve 2 purposes primarily. Mm-hmm. The first one is you're going to have students, and I would use, for example, my daughter who would be in J2 or, well, class 2 or class 3. In 2025, when you look to implement your system, you're now going to be implementing your new curriculum. They will not have had the benefit of that, so you have to deal with that transition. Right. So you still have to find some way to transition those students who you haven't prepared with your updated curriculum into a secondary school structure. So in that sense, it remains as a placement just in that transition year. Once you've decided, say you're implementing it to class 1s, or 2s, by the time they get there, you still keep it as an assessment to see how the child is performing against historical performance and how each school is performing as well. Because you must know where you need to intervene. If you don't have any measurement standard, you don't know if you're hitting your goals, you don't know if you need to go into a particular school, if you need to send in your master teachers, if you need to look at, you don't have that. So you still need some form of assessment, even if it's not being used as a placement.
Right, okay. Thank you very much for clarifying that. So you're looking at 2025 specifically. When the students transition. But the thing is, we're looking at national continuous assessment, so we will have standards that we will be able to measure at about 2 or 3 stages at the primary level, so we will know exactly the mastery that each of our students have, okay? So that's with regard to that one. You asked about the specific goals of the JCE and the SCE.
No, when I have to come back and forth.
Wrong? You said the specific goals of the JCE. What are the specific goals of the JCE? So that's not what I heard?
Was the question goals or more around
I have
what exactly is the structure and approach for those two? Go ahead.
No, I asked what is the specific goals of the education reform. As in, I want to achieve this by this time. It must be something measurable that you're looking to achieve after all of this consultation. It can't just be a dream in the air. You don't know if you're meeting it. You don't know if you're making it. It has to be measurable. It has to be time-bound. It has to be realistic. It has to be smart. In other words, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound. So I just wanted to know what were your overarching goals.
And then on the JCE, because you don't want to have to stand again, on the Junior Colleges of Excellence and the Senior Academies of Excellence, you had a specific question as it relates to them.
Are we using our resources in the best way?
Okay.
Because every school has its strength. Every school has programs that are already developed. They already have the infrastructure to support that. So if we want to give children a broad-based curriculum in first to third form and then allow them to be able to pursue whatever they want to pursue, why do we need to go about the big disruption and repurposing when we can utilize the existing infrastructure that we have, even if we have to look at possibly letting children move at a 4th form or 5th form level, should it be that the school that they are at traditionally doesn't offer what they're looking for career-wise.
Thank you very much for those clarifications, Kelly. You may take your seat.
All right.
Yes, yes.
Yes, ma'am. I've been tasked with this one.
Okay.
And you spoke to something and left out part of it. Every school has its own abilities, etc., strengths. However, those strengths, real or imagined, are tied to something else that we are not mentioning. That thing is a Barbadian perception of that particular institution. And if we try to make this change while leaving those perceptions in place, it will be dead on arrival. Yes, ma'am, it will be dead on arrival. Because if my child goes to school X, which has a reputation, but school X does not do agricultural science, and I have to move my child to school Q, that has a negative perception to do agricultural science, my child is not going to school Q. So we have to dismantle that perception. We have to put everything on an equal footing first, and then we have to move forward.
So I think I must honor the fact that you've raised some additional questions that other members of the panel may want to respond to, if not that one specifically. And then I'm going to have to invite us to move to our next contributor, again, in fairness to everyone who has lined up to ask questions. Yes? I'm guided by you. All right, so allow me to move to my left. Now at this time, the next person, please come right up to the microphone. Please just say your name, and then you can go ahead and make your contribution.
Hi, good night, everyone. My name is Emmanuel. I am a student at Harrison College right now, and I just wanted to speak a bit more on the neurodivergence aspect of education. So firstly, let me just address what the proposal, from my understanding, promotes. It promotes competency-based primary education and universal pre-primary education. But in my understanding, what I'm seeing here is that most of this has to do with curriculum development and physical circumstances. But curriculum is not teaching. Teaching is based on the curriculum. So you've spoken a lot about special needs in the proposal, but explicitly, I only have information about how their surroundings and physical being is going to be in a school. However, this curriculum is defined as subjects comprising a course of study in a school or college. So my question is then, does this imply that for students with special needs, when you give them an alternate curriculum or you give them an alternate topic comprising a course of study in their school, will you not deepen the chasms of differences between them because they will never be able to fully integrate as they are learning a different curriculum from the mass population? When you speak solely to curriculum and not pacing of teaching, then that means that you have essentially proposed that a person with ADHD learns a different biology than a person without. And that does not promote any type of productive, growing, and giving back to society for the neurodivergent person. So my question is, how do we mitigate against this? I personally have ADHD, and it's been very difficult for me from first to upper six. However, I got here, and I got here successfully. So it's not fair to then build a system based on, oh, if you have this neurodivergency, then you automatically need something. I think something that was particularly troubling for me was not that was not implicitly stated. Instead, we were talking about catering to multiple intelligences. But as, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but as he said, this is not about specifically intelligences. This is about how a child can interact with the world around them. Because as someone with ADHD, I found myself excelling in certain subjects and not so much in others. So it's not typically about, oh, is he intelligent? Is he passing this course? It's more about what you are doing to accurately pace the course for those with neurodivergence so that they are not at any pitfall when they graduate or move on.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel.
Thank you very much for the question. We didn't, and I'm sorry that you got the interpretation that we are saying a different curriculum or a different course of study.
Not interpretation. I do want to clear that up. It's stated an alternate curriculum in this that you've given to the public.
Yes, but your definition of alternate is not the one that we wanted.
Okay, so then should that not be communicated?
What we were talking about, and you limited curriculum or also only to subject. In the teaching profession, curriculum also speaks to teaching strategies.
Okay.
And a big part of this program is pairing Erdiston with external colleges so that we can build the capacity to train people to be able to deliver the type of instruction that persons with ADHD and other difficulties need, and that persons at the other end of the spectrum, the persons who come in my class and I can't teach them because they know more than me when they come in the class, and therefore I need to be able to engage them in a different way. And we are looking to provide the training for our teachers to be able to do that. We also identified that there are some that we are going to have to pull them out and put them in a different setting because of their own difficulties. But that is not supposed to be the norm, rather the exception. Okay. The real emphasis is on the training of teachers and the retraining of teachers. So we are pairing, looking for partnerships for Erdiston with external agencies that can build the capacity that we readily recognize that we do not have here.
Okay. Thank you for your response. I just wanted to zone in specifically on what my question was. It was to focus more on pacing a curriculum, as in what if it says teach biology photosynthesis, making sure that if someone with ADHD gets that in 3 months, and someone without gets that in 2 months.
And that is the type of training that we are trying to get for the teacher.
Okay.
So that they can do that.
Okay.
So that the child that needs 3 months gets the 3 months, the child that gets it in 2 weeks gets the 2 weeks, and the child that needs 5 weeks gets 5 weeks.
Okay.
Right? To truly differentiate our classrooms in a manner that everybody benefits.
Okay.
Right. So Emmanuel, thank you very much for your question. And Stephen just said it at the end. It's about differentiating instruction to meet the learner's needs. All of what we're proposing here speaks to teaching the student rather than just the subject. So if it is found that it takes you, Emmanuel, 5 days to get a concept, I will not, as your teacher, subject you to 15 days of learning about that concept because you can get easily bored. So what I would have to do as your teacher is to differentiate the instruction so that you can move on to something else, so that you can interact with your peers, help your peers, you find different ways to help you to learn. When we speak about alternative curricula, and studies will show it, it speaks to technical and vocational skills. Where possible, we will try to integrate those children who are neurodivergent or those who are having challenges, whether it be physical or whether it be learning difficulties. But there are other children who may not be able to be integrated into the mainstream system, and they need their own specialist program. So because we have in the forefront of our minds the fact that we want to cater to each student, those who are having grave difficulty or those who are exceedingly exceptional, such that they cannot be integrated, we will have to create a separate program for them. But those who can be integrated and still have the experience of learning with others, we will go as far as to do that. All right? So I just want to clarify that for you. So when you see alternative curriculum, it speaks a lot to the technical and vocational areas, you know, helping those children with those hands-on kinds of activities in order to facilitate their learning. But it's about teaching the student at every stage. And this is what this proposal reflects.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Thank you very much for your question, Emmanuel. I'll come over to my right now, to your left, for the next contributor. Yes, ma'am. Good evening.
Good evening. Can you offer a clearer...
Just give us your name, please, before you begin.
I'm Chanel. Can you give us a clearer vision of how the Senior Schools of Excellence will work if you are in two schools doing a major and a minor with respect to infrastructure, internet, how that will work? Question number one. Next, when we get to the Senior Schools of Excellence, will there be more guidance counselors to facilitate the influx of students who will be now applying for universities? Rodney Holder mentioned the deviant behavior. Have you thought of deans of discipline to deal with that using restorative practices? I'm also asking, have you thought of having a trained HFLE teacher in each school? If there are, let's say there are 25 classes, will there be a trained HFLE teacher to teach these HFLE classes? Because what is seen currently, there are subject teachers assigned to teach HFLE, their heart is not in it, therefore you don't see much production happening. The students are not being taught about health and family life education. I believe those are all my questions. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chanel.
Thank you. I didn't get your name. What's your name?
Chanel.
Chanel?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for your question, Chanel. Let me start with the last one first. You asked about the trained HFLE teacher. That is something that we're thinking about. We realize that HFLE does not get the treatment that it deserves within our school. There are some teachers who try to teach it, but they struggle, and we know that. And we have an education officer who has been working diligently to try to upskill the teachers and to try to provide the support that they need, but she's only one education officer. So instead of just trying to put a plaster on that sore, we recognize that we have to do a lot more in terms of training these teachers and getting those persons who are interested in teaching the subject. Okay, so that's the first one. You asked about clarity, read the JCE and the SCE in terms of major and minor. So because we want the students to have choice, we said that we will allow flexibility. So you might have a student at one of the senior colleges of excellence, say doing tourism and hospitality, but that child may have an interest in sports or in the arts, and they will find that their senior college of excellence doesn't have the emphasis on the sports or on the arts as they would like. So what we will do is that we can allow that student to go to another senior college of excellence when it's being offered, if there are no clashes. We will also look at the virtual, utilizing the virtual platforms, that there are modules that students can access and do the minor in that way. So it's about trying to find all avenues to allow children to fulfill their dreams.
I guess my question will then be the how. If it's virtual, will that be then independent learning, or is it live, where they're at one location and the class is happening at another location?
It will be a mixture. We are proposing a mixture of both.
So then we are considering how the internet is used, having
Right.
smart boards in each classroom. We're considering...
Yes, so we are proposing upgrading the technological infrastructure
of
at each of these schools. Okay. Yes, that's what we are proposing. Because we are being driven by the fact that we want our children to have opportunity. So what do we have to do to make sure that our children have the opportunities to fulfill their potential? So technological infrastructure has to be there in order for them to do that. Yes, so that's the reason we are exploring the funding. We are seeing how we can have these schools upgraded so that our children can fulfill their dreams.
Thank you very much, Madam Chief. I want to pause to take 2 comments from our online audience before we come back to our live questions. This person says, I agree. The primary schools need more streaming and uniformity. If anything, create more annexes and more skill-based programs to cater to the ones that are likely to fall through the cracks. That's one comment. And the next comment, criterion references test, or the criterion reference test, must be revised. It is very impractical in its current form. Therefore, continuous assessment must be restructured. 2 comments well noted, I believe, by the head table and our rapporteurs. I'm sorry, can you come back, please, Chanel?
Yes, I was saying 2 of my questions were not answered.
Could you
One
just
about deans of discipline using restorative practices, if that's a consideration, and the increase of guidance counselors in these schools of excellence, these senior schools of excellence, because there will be more students dealing with university applications.
Yes. So
thank you, Chanel.
For sure, we're looking at the expansion of the number of guidance counselors at schools, because we recognize that more and more children are coming to school with psychological challenges, social challenges, behavioral challenges, and the number of guidance counselors that we have is just not sufficient. You may be aware that we have school counselors at schools as well, who are there to help the guidance counselors, but again, because of the number of cases we're seeing, that in itself is not sufficient. So we're looking at the expansion. Yeah, there's a proposal for the expansion of the guidance counselors and expansion in the number of social workers. So that is that part with the guidance counselors. In terms of restorative practice, this is something that was offered at Erdiston Teachers Training College some time ago, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, and many of our principals had been trained in restorative practices. In fact, at the Ministry of Education, we have an officer who has conducted training quite recently for principals here in Barbados. She did it with some of our education officers as well. We need to utilize more of these practices to help with discipline. So we are exploring that as well. So thank you very much for your contributions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your keeping us honest on those questions. I'll go over to my left now to take our next contributor. I love seeing all these school students. Yes, please.
Good night. My name is Sarah, and I'm a upper 6 student at Harrison College. One reason of proposal, I think it's evident that the aim is to reform the education system to cater to the development goals. And I see that you have specialist programs at the senior schools of excellence in here. But my concern lies in if the Barbados job market is going to be able to cater to these specialist programs. Specifically, I think we can recognize that the arts is underdeveloped in Barbados. On the recent student exchange between Harrison College and Arden High School in Jamaica, I got the opportunity to go to the ministries over there, and they spoke about how Jamaica seeks to support their athletes and create a bridge to pro so they can have greats like Bob Marley and Usain Bolt. And I recognize our attempts to do the same, but we have to notice that we are not there. I attended the Performing Arts Academy, Operation Triple Threat, for 4 years, and they've been known to have Barbadian students go overseas to study arts and have successful careers on cruise ships and whatnot. And I personally was looking to do the same. But you know what changed my mind? I was at the studio day, and I saw an alum there sit in the corner and sob because they realized that the Barbados job market could not cater for them, and they had to seek alternate forms of employment. The timeline in here is too ambitious. It's not just a problem on if we have a job market for the arts and schools, but also the qualifications. The CXC Regional Merit List came out last week, Friday. You know what was written under Performing Arts Unit 2 Dance? No students received an acceptable grade across the entire region. Students are not leaving school with the qualification in this area. Before we seek to implement policies of this grandeur, we need to have a conversation with CXC and the region as a whole to fix the problems that are pre-existing within these programs that are functioning poorly, that is, students leaving without qualifications. And before we can have 100 graduates from colleges of arts and sports, we need to revive sports and arts among the general public. Persons are not willing to buy tickets to see performance shows. I stood on that stage on Tuesday and asked all of Harrison College to tell me who won the recently concluded Caribbean Premier League. 1 or 2 students said Guyana. But you know what they knew? Who won the recently concluded Football World Cup? And everybody could tell me Argentina. Before we can implement, once we have a job market and a sector that is prospering, then we can seek to implement a policy of this nature. My problem lies not in the end goal of this proposal, but the timeline. When you're creating senior colleges of excellence dedicated to niche areas that are underdeveloped in Barbados, like the arts, the question lies not in if we are preparing students for the future job market, but if under this proposal, the job market is able to cater to your future student.
Thank you very much for that very thoughtful and provocative question. Don't move yet, don't move yet. Yeah, Dr. Rudder is going to respond to you. Thank you so much.
I wish to thank you for your contribution, and I'm sitting here wearing another hat and thinking of the contribution in relation to CXC. And there's a need for deeper conversations with the Caribbean Examinations Council, where we have to look very closely at the change in demand, not only domestically, but across the region. One of the things that was said quite earlier was the need to engage in students' choices, looking at the interests of students. If you look, for example, at the subjects that you mentioned, sports, and you mentioned the arts, there are 2 things that stand out. Among our boys, they have gravitated to physical education. Why? It's an area that they believe they can dominate. Another area which is of critical importance to us is the arts. Barbados has done very well internationally. If you look at our ambassador, Rihanna, and others, we have top musicians and other artists in the island. But Barbados is not going to be our only marketplace and job area. The globe is our marketplace now, and we have to prepare Barbadians to be able to access job opportunities or entrepreneurial opportunities of a global nature, because many persons are sitting in their studies or their bedrooms and earning a living now without having to leave these shores. So the mindset itself has to change, that we have to find a job here in Barbados, but rather we have to prepare our young people to be able to access opportunities no matter where they are internationally. And this is where the digital environment comes into play, utilizing the technology that will allow us to be able to access learning, not just within the context of the proposed senior colleges, but to be able to access learning no matter where we can access the material from, to enhance the learning outcomes for all of our students. And that way, we are looking at improving the productivity of Barbadians to contribute towards national development.
I take your point, but I also want to say that you're mentioning the global arena as a job market, but the resources to get there are limited. I have a friend that was accepted to the University of Michigan for an acting program. That's like one of the top acting programs in all the world. They went to NCF, tried to get a grant. They're struggling with funding, deferred their acceptance, and are still trying to get the money to go. So this entire notion that when you have 100+ students, or this is an entire senior college of excellence, it's not 5 students, I don't think it's reasonable with our limited resources to say that all those students will be able to access a job in the global arena, especially when scholarships and exhibitions and things like this are hard to find. Not everybody's getting it. So when you have an entire school of students, they're all not going to be able to be employed in the global arena.
Point well made. I think what we are looking here at is a disparity in terms of the access to funding for tertiary education. And you did make a very valid point as it relates to limited resources in terms of scholarships and funding. And this is where we may have to seek to engage not only the private sector. If you look at what's happening in Jamaica, opportunities for advancement do not only come through the government. The private sector that benefits tremendously from the human capital that we're developing. They contribute significantly to the athletics and sporting program in Jamaica. We also need to engage the private sector so that they too can see the potential benefits of investing in our brightest and our best return into Barbados. There are many young people who go overseas to study on scholarships or even funded by their parents or other benefactors. They complete their studies. They have to return home. You know what happens? They're unable to find a job commensurate with the qualifications that they have been able to achieve. And therefore, we have to look at a multiplicity of options that would allow us to be able to cater to, one, the funding that is required to support tertiary education for those persons who become qualified as a result of the throughput from the system, but also to partner with the private sector to support government and programs that would allow for young people to have internships, job opportunities, and to be able to contribute to national development no matter the area of study. So it is something that we have to engage in discussion on so that we can find a best fit for all persons who have a desire to not only pursue excellence in terms of their studies here or otherwise, but also to be able to work here in Barbados and contribute to our future development.
I agree with you on the private sector needing to be engaged, but I notice you're saying a lot of we need to, as in the future, but it's not a definite. And until I can get that definite when I go to my School of Excellence, then I don't think it should be implemented in the policy as of right now.
I appreciate that. We do have some engagements already and partnerships, but there's a need for expansion. What we're looking at now is basically changing the trajectory for persons who are in our school system. And therefore, we have to combine the vision to facilitate that access with the realistic opportunities in partnership with various persons to ensure that we're able to meet the demand that is likely to emanate from the expansion that we're contemplating. And it is not something that will happen overnight, but we have to plan it very carefully and work with all of our stakeholders. So that's why we are visioning and working towards putting the concrete actions in place to ensure that we can achieve our goals for all Barbadians.
I want to say here, Sarah, thank you very much for your questions, very thought-provoking questions. You spoke about going to a senior college of excellence that has an area of specialization and then coming out and not finding a job. We want our students to understand that it is not necessarily just about coming out and finding a job. That's given this age, that's an old-time way of thinking. Our children are excellent at creating various avenues. You can come out and create a job and create jobs. But before you respond to that, we have areas like food science and agriculture. A lot of research has gone into determining the areas of specialization because we looked at Barbados and we determined what Barbados needed to move forward as a country or to be globally competitive. We have food science and agriculture. There is no denying that food security is a problem in Barbados. If ships stop coming here and bringing food here, what do you think will happen to us, right? So food security is an area where we need people. We have technology, including ICT and robotics. This world is technologically advancing. I was in a meeting just a few days ago where a company was talking about people working from Barbados in other parts of the world. So you can be based in Barbados, operating with their technology, but working in Canada, or working in Singapore, or working in China, based in Barbados. Also, our children have the ability to create apps. I remember about 5 years ago or so, I was leading the Coding and Robotics Initiative here in this country. And if you could see the products of our children, 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, you'll be blown away. So what if we create the kind of environment where these children can create the apps that we will use, the apps of tomorrow, not only for Barbados, but for the region and the world? We have the built environment. When it comes to buildings, it's more than bricks and mortar. No, we have to develop climate resilient buildings, not where it should be now. We should have a parallel track where we should be seeking, and I have Dr. Denise Charles here, who's the Education Officer for Arts. We should be seeking to revive arts here so that we create a pipeline for our children when they leave, so they can further create when they leave. All right? So because it doesn't exist now, doesn't mean it will not exist in 2025. And I can tell you that we are aggressively addressing the arts. Education Officer Dr. Denise Charles will tell you that, even when it comes to how teachers view arts and sports. So we recognize where we want to be, and we are trying to put systems in place to get us there.
Sarah, I'm able to allow you to make one response, and then unfortunately we're going to have to move to the next contributor, okay?
Okay, no problem.
Go ahead.
I agree with you with that being a parallel, and I spoke to that as well. But my point is more so that we're not there right now, and I actually think it's kind of unrealistic to assume that we'll be there by 2025. Another point is that you were saying we can create our own jobs, which I do agree with, because you're saying that these jobs are needed for national development, which I can appreciate. But when students go into these jobs with the expectations that they're going to have to create their own jobs, that is a barrier to accessing that field once again, which is kind of contradictory to what you're trying to do, because you want to encourage us to be part of that. But when you're going in knowing you have to create your own job, it's kind of it's not appealing at all. And yeah, that's basically, and I also appreciate that you said that things like this don't happen overnight, and I think that is just my problem with the proposal. It feels like 2025 is too soon. I agree with you that the arts and sports and all these other initiatives need to be revived. I'm very passionate about that area of my life, but I also feel like I was a victim of dreaming, because now I don't think I'd be able to pursue the arts right now in this state of Barbados without going overseas to doing so, and would not be able to come back with a secure job market. So I agree with you, but I think the timeline needs to be rethought.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much. I'm going to come to the next contributor from my right, just after we take this question from our online audience. The question is there going to be a nationwide or regional call and the hiring of more teachers to meet all of these needs?
We may have to hire more teachers. We may not, at the end of the day. So with regard to this, and I heard, in fact, the evidence shows that the teacher-student ratio in Barbados is roughly 1 to 15. So we basically have more teachers. We have more teachers than persons will say than are needed at this point in time. So we have to look at retraining, retooling. When we've completed our full audit, we may have to get more teachers. We may not at the end of the day.
Thank you, Madam Chief. I'll go to my right, your left now, for our next contributor.
Mr. Saul?
Hello, good night, everyone.
I'm sorry, ma'am. Please forgive me. My error, not yours. I believe that Mr. Jackman wanted to add an additional response before you begin. You don't need to sit, though, unless you wanted to.
One of the things that we're doing is that we are actually carrying out an audit to identify where our teachers are, where they are skilled, and how we are going to reposition them to make this happen. I saw the head shaking when they said there were more teachers. So let me share. I've been the principal of 3 schools over the last 3 years. I left a school with 400 children and 65 teachers to go to a school with 700 children, 900 children and 71 teachers, to go to a school with 1,100 children and 71 teachers. So yes, when we say because there are some schools that the role is significantly smaller, but the staff has never changed. And there are also schools that are getting bigger, and the staff has never changed. So even if we stay with the current system, we are going to have to redeploy teachers to change those ratios, or we're going to have to redeploy students to create equity.
Thank you, Mr. Jackman. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, good night, everyone. My name is Shareth Peterson. I really want to commend this team for having the courage as public servants to actually initiate this conversation, because I know it's not easy as a public servant to, I want to say, be innovative. I feel like I sit here with a lot of despair. I sit here with, as a parent, with a lot of concern. As a parent in Barbados in these times, we have to be resilient. And we have to be resilient because of all the things that are coming at us. And now it feels like the floorboards are going to be removed from us completely, because what we counted on as a stable education system is now under threat. And that is really hard for me. And what is really even harder is to think about, I spend so much time and resources and make so many sacrifices to educate my child in this system, and y'all want to talk about global citizens. I don't want to send my child overseas. I want my child to see a bright future in Barbados. I want the job market in Barbados to cater for that child. I want the job market in Barbados to be competitive enough that if they choose while they're in Barbados to go somewhere else, their skills will be respected, revered, and valued, which is not the case and probably will never be the case in Barbados. Those are the kinds of conversations we need to have. And we need to talk about guerrilla parenting. And what do I mean by that? I mean that parenting does not start from the time you take the child from QEH, it starts from the womb. When we look at children who go to the Harrisons and Queens and all those, it didn't start from there. They didn't start thinking about planning for their child's future at 11 plus. It started from the womb. It started by building and instilling their children the value of education. It started from parents understanding that you have to provide rich, stimulating environments for these children to grow up in. And that is a factor that is missing from all of this. Parenting. We need to talk about, I saw in this draft proposal, each child matters. I want each parent in Barbados to matter. We have to educate our parents better for a better and brighter future, because behind every successful child in Barbados, there is a parent who has made enormous sacrifice. And that's the kind of conversation that we need to have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution, ma'am.
Yeah.
I don't think you'll get disagreement from the members of the head table on that strong and true point.
Yeah.
I'll go to my left now. You're right for our next contributor. We're moving along swimmingly.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi, good evening.
My name is Daniela Clark. I'm the head girl of Harrison College. Here we had Sarah Bisram, who is the deputy head girl of Harrison College, Emmanuel Seeley, who is a third form senior prefect, Jordan Grad, who will soon present, who is a second form senior prefect, Storm and Sydney, who are renowned prefects, and Amara Brathwaite, who is a lower sixer, who is heading for big things. We are products of this system, and this system is not broken. I understand that there is a need for improvement, but that is not a need for eradication of a system that works. The transition from a 3-tier to a 2-tier system is detrimental to adolescent development. You're standing in an institution that has produced some of the most important, well, not most important, but very significant influential people in this island, and I can tell you why. Because from the moment we entered Harrison College, we had someone to look up to. The senior school acts as a very important model for the school, and there's a culture to uphold. As you progress through the school, students develop a sense of pride, a sense of leadership, a sense of comfort in the school, which allows them to develop as people. And when we strip these students from schools that they have been attending and building their foundation in for 4 years, and then jumping them into a year where they're now starting CXC exams, I can tell you CXC is not easy. CSEC is not easy, and by leaps and bounds, CAPE is not easy. I have relied so heavily on the camaraderie of my classmates and the guidance of teachers that I've known for 6 years to be able to endure this. I would never have been able to do it with teachers that I knew for 2 years, classmates that I knew for 2 years. It takes a village to do CAPE, to do CSEC. Furthermore, I will touch on the teachers. I will digress on that topic because I think you guys can all put together where I'm coming from, and I have a time constraint. We have topics that are oversaturated. We have sciences. We have at least 6 science teachers for bio, chem, and physics each at Harrison College. We have 1 teacher for accounts, 1 teacher for business, 1 teacher for entrepreneurship. We have no teachers for food and nutrition, no teachers for tourism, no teachers for agriculture, and we are expecting to build schools on these neglected areas of studies out of these. We don't have enough teachers for these specific subject areas. We may have an influx of science teachers, an influx of business teachers, but we are building entire schools with the 10 tourism teachers that we have across the island and expecting them to support an entire school. I'm not sure where they're coming from, and I'm not sure if we're expecting that other teachers who have similar degrees are meant to alter their career paths to be able to suit these schools and teach those students. I'm not sure where those teachers are going to come from, and I would love to hear your views on that as well. And then where it pertains to what you guys would just mentioned, where we have this large supply of teachers, according to my observation, a lot of these teachers are, as I said, science and business teachers. If we have 2 science schools, where do the rest of those teachers go? Right? And then the biggest issue that I have with this reform so far, I really appreciate y'all's view that there is an issue in the education system. As I said, I don't think that means that we need to destroy what we already have, but the timeline, I'm not sure how we expected to be able to achieve these grand dreams in 2 years. Why are we neglecting that? It takes a transition period that we can flesh out all of these issues, these fundamental issues. Something like, if I live in St. Lucie and there's only 1 school for me for tourism and I want to do tourism and it's in St. Philip, how am I supposed to get there? Right? So they're fundamental issues that I think if we are given the time to flesh them out, we can achieve this system, which I understand and respect the core values of, but I think it needed time so that we can get the optimal outcome and the most efficient outcome for our country and our development. That's all.
Thank you very much for your contributions. Don't run away yet, don't run away yet. I think that the Chief would like to respond to some of the things you've mentioned.
Daniel, thank you. Thank you for your contributions. I have a question. 2025, as we said, is the proposal.
Understood.
It can be 2026, it can be 2027. To your mind, what is the best start date?
The start
For
date?
your mind, roughly. Should we talk about a start date?
I understand where you're coming from, that we have to set a goal so that we can work towards something.
No, I'm not implying anything by the question. No, I'm not. I'm just asking you a question. What, to your mind, would be a good start date? Or to your mind, do you think we should have proposed a start date?
I think it very heavily depends on something like what Sarah said. When we can develop institutions that can employ the students that we are producing, maybe we can implement a start date once we have kind of at least had those thoughts. Implement a start date after we have figured out where these students are going, what we can do with these students, what they're getting out of the systems that we are putting them into now. I think it's hard to determine when that start date could be, but I think a lot more thought could have gone into play before we came up with this date of 2 years from now.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your thoughts, Danielle.
Thank you.
And in terms of the audit, I heard Mr. Japman speak about the audit and the fact that we have somebody working on that right now, trying to determine the physical resources we have, the human resources, trying to see whether if what we are putting forward, whether what we are putting forward can work. When you think about it, yes, the audit should have been completed by now to inform what we are proposing. It didn't work out that way, but we are having discussions. And I want us to understand that these are discussions. We are not, and I have to reiterate this because I think that sometimes people forget or we forget, but these are discussions. We recognize that there is a need to change the system, and we're not just talking about the junior college and senior college. There are a number of other things that we spoke about, but I know people are hung on those things. But there are a number of things that we speak about where there's inequity within our system. So you started by saying that the system is not broken. Did I hear you correctly?
You did.
Right. And that's your opinion, and that's fine for you. But the system is not broken for you. But for several other young people out there, the system is broken. It is not serving them. It isn't, right? Mm-hmm. Now, these are discussions where we can refine our thoughts, where we can hear from you, we can go back, we can discuss, and then move forward. And I really want to say at this time that I appreciate your contribution with regard to 2025. We could look at that date again to see whether we can push it back. We are not saying it has to be 2025. That was a proposal in looking at everything. But of course, after listening to everyone and looking at the emotions, about, what can happen, we are listening, and we will incorporate the ideas into how we can move forward. So I thank you and your colleagues. I like to see the young people coming forward. I thank you and your colleagues for coming forward and sharing your thoughts on this.
Can I just make one quick addition in reference to what you just said? I know that I stand in a place of privilege as having gone to Harrison College and being in the position that I am in, and I'm not blind to that. I fully acknowledge and appreciate every member of staff, every student, every resource that has been available to me that is not available to everyone else in this country. My point being that I said we are not a broken system, and I stand by the fact that we are not a broken system. We are in a system in need of heavy repairment, but it does not mean eradication in my eyes. And where that stands is even if we're doing this quick-paced timeline, we have to try it out somewhere. You're looking at building 2 other schools. Maybe we can implement some way of trying it out there instead of dismantling schools that we already have to kind of recreate this whole system that we've come up with. So finding other ways of implementing it, seeing as we do have 2 schools that are now starting to come up, and those are going to be part of the system as well. So just, I guess, things to consider at this point.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. We have one final response from Mr. Jackman. You can have your seat, that's fine. And then we'll go over to this side of the room. Yes, sir.
You sounded, ma'am, like you were in the room. We raised a lot of those things as we went through the discussions. And one of the reasons that we have decided that there has to be a date, it doesn't have to be 2025, but there has to be a date, and there have to be a date. Because we went the other route 30 years ago. In 1995, we went the other route with the phased implementation and the test and fix with the Education Sector Enhancement Project, popularly known as EduTech. And we put a lot of equipment in schools, and the teaching practices didn't change. And by the time we got to phase 4, phase 1 was obsolete. Right? We have learned by experience that if we do that again, it will be stillborn. And that is a harsh thing to have to say, but we have learned that by experience. And I know it is scary to think that you're going to take up all that you know and drop something new on. But if we don't do it, we have to ask the question, can we afford? Because I was a very junior teacher in 1994-95 with EduTech, so I have to ask the question. No, I'm not going to be in the service, let me say that. My grandchildren will probably be in school if my children ever decide to have them. But can we afford in 20 years' time to be having this discussion again because we didn't do anything? And that is the most important question that we have to ask. What we end up with may not be this totally, but we have to do something. If not, we'll be here in 20 years' time asking this conversation again. And the cost will be even greater when we look in terms of the social ills that are already affecting our society.
Thank you, Mr. Jackman. I'm going to go to our next contributor. You can come to the mic, sir. I just want to flag this. Yes, you can stay. I'm going to just mention a comment from our online audience and then remind you also that there is the opportunity for you to submit all of your contributions or any additional contributions you'd like to make using that email address on the back of your pamphlet. I just want to flag that because in the interest of time, in the event we don't get through with everyone's contribution, you will still have the opportunity to make your contributions there. While you're there, so let me just read this one. We need to dismantle this thing called the prestige of schools such as QC and HC. That is what is keeping us back and maintaining the strong status quo in our nation. All right, sir. Go right ahead.
I would like to start, first of all, by...
Just tell us your name, please.
Sorry, my name is Jordan Gregg. I am a senior prefect here at Harrison College. And I just wanted to start by, first of all, acknowledging my privilege at obviously attending Harrison College. And I also attended a private primary school. So I've had a very good, I can say, in this system, a very good school experience. So I wanted to start there. I also wanted to set the precedent that when it's talked about that the system will now do something, it insinuates that the system did not fit that need before, which I don't think is true for a lot of things. So the first point I wanted to address was that two persons of the panel, I think, were talking about how this new program will assist gifted children into thriving more so. And I wanted to say that if it's one thing Barbados can do, it is make sure that gifted children excel. I think you can look up there and you can see 7 scholarship boards and 6 exhibition boards. I know there are 25 students in our lower 6 that are currently on exhibition and scholarship watch. And I know even in terms of music and art, I know people at QC, which is not necessarily known as an art school, that have won NIFCA awards in art. I know people that have gone from Harrison College to go to BCC and have excelled there. We have top musicians such as Nicholas Branker, who have gone and traveled the world and still come back and given us their talents. So I strongly believe that if it's anything, we make sure that those that excel. However, if there even is a critique of the system, it is that the system focuses too much on those who excel and ignores the rest. So I wanted to start there. The second point I wanted to get into was that I see a lot of things in this pamphlet, talking about more so of a well-rounded child. We've seen that through the integration of things like HFLE, which is to teach things that are more so like on the hidden curriculum, which we learn in Caribbean studies, that are not necessarily formally taught. And that is kind of trying to be shifted, it seems, into more of a palatable and measurable context through things like the SEL, which is the self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, relationship skills, responsible decisions. However, if a child is taught about this, it's not the same as the child experiencing this. And I think that, well, I don't think, actually, from the Caribbean Studies syllabus for CAPE, Caribbean Studies for CAPE, the home and family is the main form of primary socialization, which means that no matter how much the child is taught at school, if they go home and their self-awareness is not inspired, if they don't have the social awareness at home, if they don't have that self-management, the relationship skills are not there, and the responsible decision-making is not there, then that teaching is null and void. I wanted then also, the final point I wanted to speak on was that I agree that many students do fall by the wayside in our current school structure. However, even sitting here and hearing a lot of other people, and even hearing from the panelists, it doesn't seem as if the aim of this reform is really focused in the correct place, and I think we do need to shift our focus, because the students, for example, that are neurodivergent and have the mental disorders, have the disabled students, those that are in extreme poverty, all of those are people, if not the main demographic of those who are most affected by this current system. And I've heard very, very little about those sorts of groups in this town hall. In fact, out of the 30 pages in this booklet, only 2 focus on the things that I named before, which is 1/15 of the campaign being about those who truly are most affected and fall behind the most. So if you truly are doing it for them and doing it for those who are falling the furthest behind, I do not see how schools of excellence and secondary diplomas and learning about coding and robotics help someone struggling in school because their parents fight at home. I don't see how it helps them when they didn't have food for dinner and cannot focus in class because their belly rumbling. Furthermore, if you ultimately test the students to the same ultimate standard, that being CXC, CSEC, CAPE examinations, the concept of getting rid of 11+ to alleviate teachers of teaching to an exam or alleviating those pressures also becomes null and void because it still exposes children to that same preparing for exam, and then not only are they now being tested against the others in their island, but they're being compared and ranked, not only to the island, but to the entire region for the very first time. I think that is very detrimental, and it can actually be even more detrimental than the 11+ to the social development of 11/15-year-olds.
I'll allow you to make one more point before we ask for a response. That's fine.
And then ultimately, I want to just get on to that. Even, I think a lot of other people also touched on this, but even though we do have a lot of people who excel in those CXC subjects, they don't really have anywhere else to go. And I saw even on the 3rd page, one of the first points about what are the barriers to student success, which is what this reform, I would believe, is trying to eliminate those barriers to success. The very first point is programming out of sync with the needs of the economy. Last time I checked, we have an aging population and severe brain drain, which in turn means that even if our programming is in sync with the economy, which we currently somewhat do, the 20-year-olds, the 21-year-olds, even the 16-year-olds that come out of this education system do not have anywhere to go. And that's my final point. So I do think the system needs to change, but not in this way.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Dr. Rudder, Madam Chief, any responses?
Thank you for your contribution. There are a couple of key points which were made, and I think that the proposal is intended to try to address some of the challenges that we have in the system. Every education system will have elites and those who will excel. We recognize that. But if we take a careful look at how our system is performing right now, those who are the high flyers will continue to succeed. But then we have a vast number of students who we need to be productive contributors to the development of our country and our economy, whose performances are not meeting the kind of standards that we would wish to see them reach as a country. And therefore, the effort to try to change the system is to turn around performances, to facilitate enhanced learning outcomes for all children. Everyone will not excel at the highest end, but we need to have more persons performing better in our education system. So for example, where we can have our national pass rates move, let's say, from 40 to 44% in mathematics, and that's the reality at CSEC level, in the 40s, to, let's say, in another 10 years' time, 60 to 70%. of young people leaving our secondary schools passing CSET mass. That's an improvement. That's where we have to go. So it's a matter of measuring how we facilitate enhanced learning outcomes and performance for the vast majority of young people in our school system, as opposed to a focus annually on those who will get the scholarships, they will do very well, the top end. But we want to ensure that in the middle, we can have an enhanced performance and an increased number of persons who are doing very well to be able to further contribute to the social and economic development of our country going forward. And that way, we will be able to address some of the issues relating to poverty better, issues relating to unemployment and underemployment, and contributing towards the survival and the lifestyle of those persons who exit the system. So those persons who have retired, and the young man spoke about an aging population. If we have an aging population, we have to cater to them in terms of healthcare and other social services. The young people that we are dependent on must be able to contribute towards the provision of those services by way of their productivity. And they need to be adequately qualified and educated to be able to do so. And that's why we must change the system at this point in time to have more persons leaving our education system better qualified and better able to support our economic development.
So, sorry, just in there, you said that a lot of these people, or you want to invest kind of in this education to be able to fix a lot of those problems, such as the poverty and that sort of stuff. And you then also continued there at the end to then say that those people could also then go and contribute back into the economy. But I think the main point of what a lot of us were saying, especially I'm nearly 18 and about to leave school, I can't even get the degree that I want to do at UE in the Caribbean, which is very frustrating to me because I want that Caribbean experience. And it's frustrating because I can't get that here. So when I get those degrees and when I do the skilled labor, when I get the Barbados scholarships, you're not able to come back and contribute to the economy. You're not able to come back and fix that growing population. You're not able to come back and fix the poverty because of how the system is set up. And I think that's kind of the main frustration with a lot of young people.
Thank you for that. I think a point very, very well made and received. I just want to flag this, not to alarm you, but normally we aim to wrap up our consultations at around 9:30. I'm conscious, though, that we had a slightly delayed start. And so I think in fairness, I'll try to make an accommodation for a few more contributions. But I want to set it out there in the atmosphere. In the event that we're not able to accept or receive all of your contributions, those of you who are currently in line, in as much as our time is escaping a bit. But I'm grateful for all the rich contributions we've had so far this evening. And I especially want to celebrate the young people who have stayed and have made such tremendous contributions this evening. I honor you and I thank you. This has been an excellent showing by you and I appreciate that. I was on my right, and so I head over to my left now, and we'll try our best to take a few more contributions.
Hi, good night.
Good night.
My name is Danielle.
Hi, Danielle.
I hate going after these young people because they've been amazing. So I want to speak just a bit about open with best practices. A million years ago, I went to St. Michael's School, and we had a session in our curriculum where we could choose to do anything. And I don't know why it was stopped. It was stopped by the time I went into third form, but during that time, we would mill around the school, you would choose any new activity and you would just try something new. And you did that for a whole term. And then the next term, you had to try something else. So just sharing that we have best practices in Barbados that have worked. I want to underscore the thing about the points made about data. I think we would all feel a lot more comfortable with firm timelines. Yes, you can shift the timelines, but anytime you're starting a project, all of that should have been written at the very beginning. So I think I would feel a lot more comfortable if even in the planning, I don't want timelines to shift because that means it wasn't well planned. You spoke about points of intervention. I'm speaking as a mother and as someone who works in the civil society and the NGO sector for all of my career. We can all agree the education system needs reform, and I'm very thankful to be here at a time when you're doing that, because even as a student, I knew that the education system needed reform. It's not just now that it's in need of reform, so commendations for doing that. But one of the challenges that I have is that whenever we speak about points of intervention, it's always, we speak about drugs, police are brought in. We speak about counselors, you speak with children who are at-risk students. All students now are at risk. Every single young person is at risk. I went through COVID, and at the end of it, I felt like I was at risk. So we have to redefine what we call an at-risk student. We have to redefine the way we engage young people. It is not police is not the best person to speak to a young person who is in trouble. Fear does not work. It never has. It's not going to start doing so now. As a civil society worker, where is civil society in all of this? You're speaking about poverty, you're speaking about all of the social ills. We do this every single day. So yes, we're scared and we know that there's a need for change, but I think you need to expand the actors, stop working in silos. Everyone has something to contribute. Yes, it is not the Ministry of Education's problem alone. Lots of us have lots that we can do, but you have to expand the people, and we have to expand the ways that we deal with young people, the ways that we see young people, and particularly at-risk young children, because all of them. My child went to one of the top secondary schools, and I spent the whole time knowing that she was at risk every single day I sent her to school. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those contributions. I'll open for any member of the panel who'd like to share a perspective and response.
I'll thank you for your contributions. I'm hoping you're volunteering civil society, because in all honesty, we recognize that this is something we cannot do alone. Schools on the individual level engage. And let me say to you that the Barbados Police Service in 2023 is not the Barbados Police Service of 1983. The officers that come to us now are community-based officers who are trained social workers who are attempting to bridge the gap. They don't necessarily come to instill fear. One of the biggest programs they are running now is the Princess Trust. It's actually being run out of the police service, and that is doing a lot to reform the thinking of young people. Without the oil, you're going to end up in jail. It's actually exposing them to a lot of opportunities and giving them the opportunity for internships and to grow. So they themselves know that they had to change the approach. I've worked in a jurisdiction that no matter what the child does, it is go to juvenile liaison, let us get some counseling. It took a long time before they actually took one and put him before the law courts and charged him, because that's not what they want to do anymore. They're really trying the whole reform and rebuilding, and they use the same social agencies, child guidance clinic, and things to provide the type of servicing to help the clients that go to juvenile liaison. So there is a change. For us with this reform, we are realizing that we started, and the chief hasn't put a name on it, but we are actually thinking about saying that schools will now have a student services section that will operate in conjunction with the student services section of the ministry. We've already put in safety officers, school counselors, and a guidance counselor in some schools. And we are recognizing that for schools with a plan of 1,100, those three are not going to be enough. We may need 2 guidance counselors and social workers along with the existing system of the 3 that are there. We recognize that all are at risk, and that the risks are different. We also recognize that the dislocation that is going to come from something like this means that there's going to have to be greater student support. That is the truth. And we heard it earlier, there's a section in the booklet that speaks about parents where we're going to have to engage NGOs to help us with the education of parents in assisting with the whole process.
Thank you, Mr. Jackman.
Thank you. I want to say something.
Oh, the chief would like to add before you make your response.
Thank you, Mr. Jackman. You made the point that I was going to make about the police, because I know for a fact that when they go in, they have a way of speaking with the children that really helps them. But I wanted to, where did she go? Oh, right. So you said something earlier. You said anytime that you are starting a project, you need timelines.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
We are not starting a project, right? I just have to say this again, because I think that sometimes we're getting a little confused about what is happening here. What we are putting forward are proposals. At the end of the day, when we have evaluated, when we have discussed, and I'm sure that we will have robust discussion based on a lot of the things that you said, we will put forward then what we call the final recommendation to Cabinet, after sharing it with you, of course, and we will have timelines, we'll talk about the resources and so on that we have, all of the details that you want. But what we are discussing now are these things in principle. And I remember Martin Luther King, because in order for us to be here, he needed to have a dream. I went back there. He needed to have a dream for us to be here. He didn't wake up one day and it happened. Or he didn't say, well, okay, it's going to cost this, it's going to cost that. We are at the point right now of co-creating. And I just want to reinforce that. So a lot of the detail that you're asking for in terms of cost, in terms of this, in terms of that, you're not going to get that right now, because we are not to the point of starting the project. You're not to that point. We still have to make a decision with regard to what the structure will look like in terms of transforming this education system. And that's why we're so grateful to hear your opinions, to hear your thoughts on what we are proposing, because we can incorporate it, have our discussions, then come up with the final proposal, based on what you said. So I just wanted to make sure that we understood that.
Thank you.
The only thing I will also point out is that I didn't put 2025 there. So I still have to measure it on the basis of what I am being presented with.
No, that's fine, that's fine.
No, so in terms of the timeline and the dream, maybe 2025 is the time that we have the dream fully fleshed out, and then the starting of the implementation. It's just that in the roadmap, there are some things that suggest that the 2025 or the goalpost is that the schools are in place.
What we would like to see.
What we would like to see. And I commend you for dreaming, because like I said, we all know that the system needs changing. With regard to the police, sorry if I made it sound as if police are how they were when I was in school, which was not 1983, but we'll proceed. I know that they've done a lot of changes, but I just said that in reference because police was raised as who comes into the school to speak to children when they're having issues with drugs. So I said that in response to that point. If they're doing the social and the developmental work, I commend that, because they are part of the society, but too often we do still bring in police with things that are for negative behaviors, as opposed to bringing in a range of different people who can speak to positive behaviors. I meant to say this, and I'll say it very quickly. I think a holistic plan also has to have in things about diet. It has to have in things about, we're speaking about behavior. There's no good behavior without diet. One of the biggest challenges young people are facing, and even at the top secondary schools, again, I will say, no whole food, no plant-based food, no healthy food in the cafeteria. So to ask children to perform when they can't eat, when they're not eating well, we have to think about it in a holistic, very different way.
This is the reason that we implemented the school nutrition policy, and we have had a Phillips Boyce here, who's our education officer with responsibility for that.
I know the school nutrition policy is there.
Right.
It's just the implementation doesn't everything takes time. So I don't expect you to get it right in one go.
Okay,
But
continue.
I'm just saying that when looking at the plan, and I have not looked at the entire plan, so I did hear when you say there's a much longer version.
Yeah.
I'm hoping in there, in light of the mental health crisis that our young people are clearly facing, and not just young people, that our nation is clearly facing, that there is not just social emotional learning in this very, it's everything overlaps. And if it's done in silos, which is how we tend to operate in this society, we can fix the education system and it will fail just because labor was not involved.
Yeah.
Or because, and labor is the third sector. We can, everything has to be overlapped because, as the young people said, they have a fear that they're not going to have jobs at the end of the process.
You are so right. Actually, in the long document, we have a section called Interagency Collaboration, and it speaks to the Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, you know, with regard to parental education. It speaks to other agencies that we will have to rely on in order to make this a reality.
Okay. And I beg you to include civil society, engage us, and I'm with the Barbados Red Cross, so yes, I am.
Thank you. And if
Thank
you
you.
read and you think that you can offer some more advice or give more contributions, feel free to do that via email.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll take one online comment before we go. Yes, ma'am, you can come to the microphone. That's fine. And I want to acknowledge and thank the police officer who I see in the back. Thank you, sir. Academic year 2025 to 2026. What about the kids entering 4th or 5th form who have plans or have already started SBAs? How will that disruption be minimized? Mr. Luke?
That is another frequently asked question. What will kids entering 4th and 5th form who have plans of already or have already started SBAs? They can continue their preparation for SBAs. For us, with the proposal CXC, we're not waving a magic wand and saying go away, and they will not exist. It will not exist after 2025. These core curricula of our schools will still allow students to take CXC geography, CAPE geography, CAPE mathematics, and so on and so forth. So the CXC programs will still exist.
Thank you, Mr. Luke. Yes, ma'am, and you notice we're at about 9:46, and so we are on the home stretch.
Okay, I'll be quick.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Monet. I am an SEN and primary maths specialist. I have several questions, but firstly, I'd like to say that through personal conversations, attending meetings, and watching online, the education system is very lacking in inclusion. It's a big issue, and there's been a lot of comments tonight about delaying a timeline. Actually, when it comes to inclusion, you should move your date forward because these kids really need immediate intervention to help them. So I've got 4 questions, and the first one links to IEPs that have been spoken of. And I'd like to know how this would be implemented and monitored. So, for example, if child has autism and struggles with social situations, and it is stated on their IEP that they should have social stories to help them, who or when will these be implemented and delivered to this child to help them? How often will these IEPs be updated to reflect children's needs, attainments, and progress, both academically, socially, emotionally, and physically, if necessary? So, e.g., will it be termly, will half-termly, etc.? And will teaching aides be trained to help implement these targets for these IEPs? My second one is that teachers seem to be planning for their year groups and not their children in their classes. So, for example, it might be writing a setting description and you're using relative clauses, where child B in the class doesn't even understand word classes or using an expanded noun phrase. So moving forward, how will you ensure that lessons are differentiated so that all pupils walk away making some kind of progress? Will you adopt an almost some kind of structure when planning? Question 3, your EYFS, so your pre-primary ideas are great, but I just want to know how will they be monitored? A play-based curriculum is good and great if it is done well and correctly. The lady over here spoke about people and their training skills. If you're implementing this curriculum and people don't have the basic training skills to work with these children, the curriculum is not going to work. There will be no implementation of that. So, and also, you're speaking about the student profiles. These student profiles, if they're being used from pre-primary, how are they then going to be transferred to primary and secondary in line with GDPR and safeguarding? So for example, if it's done online, a lot of people keep their passwords saved on their laptop. If that falls into the wrong hands, you've got a disaster. Somebody can access every student's information online. And my last one is maths teaching over here is very procedural. It is look at the board, learn how to do this. You either do it or you don't. There's no visual and there's no conceptual teaching being taught. So how are you going to equip teachers with the methods that they can then pass this on to their students so they can help close gaps but also excel mathematicians? So for example, there's a lot of rote learning. So a child may be able to say, yeah, I know that 6 times 700 is 4,200, but can they articulate why? Can they say, well, I know that 7, the relationship between 7 and 700 is 100 times more. Therefore, I've used my 6 times tables to get that answer. So they are my 4 questions.
So we may not be able to address all of them, but our rapporteurs are here making sure they're all documented. So I'll allow the head table to respond to perhaps a specific question that has been raised, being mindful of the time.
Yes.
Thank you for your question, ma'am.
Thank you for your questions, Moni. The question related to math, changing how math is taught, that would have to come with teacher training. And this is the reason that we've asked our Distant Teachers Training College to develop programs to help teachers in the pedagogy, in the how to teach mathematics, how to teach reading, because there are some teachers who struggle indeed with teaching these things. And they will not do it in isolation. We've explored relationships with Columbia University. In fact, Columbia University is now a partner to Distant Teachers Training College, and we are in very embryonic stages when it comes to developing tailored programs for our teachers. So that work is being undertaken right now. You asked about the student profiles and the students' data, and you agreed that the student profiles will be good for students. However, we have to safeguard the students' data. So we are in discussions relative to that, how we can do that. We don't have the answer right now, but we are in very, very deep discussion on how we can make sure that the children's information is safe. You spoke about teachers catering to the year group and just teaching the subject. Remember, we said as part of this education transformation, we want teachers teaching the student. So again, Distant Teachers Training College will play a role in their continuous professional development workshop offerings in helping teachers to teach in a differentiated way. Okay? And you spoke about IEPs. I can tell you that we have a team right now looking at a standardized way of addressing IEPs. So they're trying to answer the same questions you're asking. How often, what kinds of IEPs? But I know that what we want to do is that we want to have a specialist at every level that can assist, the teachers at that particular level in making sure that the IEPs are sound and that you have results at the end of the day. All right. So thank you.
Thank you, and we've noted the other questions as well. Thank you so much. I've sought the leave of the minister on my left to allow us to take 2 more questions. Unfortunately, we won't be able to take any more than that. So as we did before, I'll take 1 question from my left and 1 from my right. And again, let me remind you, please, at the back of your booklet, there's an email address there where you can make full submission of any other questions or comments, suggestions you may have. You can utilize that avenue to submit your feedback there as well.
Hello? Yes. Good night, everyone. Thank you for having the town halls and opening the discussion. I think it's very relevant and overdue, given that EduTech was such a long time ago. I had several questions, but trying to pick the one is quite challenging. But my main one, which everyone would have stated at some point in varying ways, is why the move away from the current education structure. Can't the proposed enhancements be added on a phased basis? So pretty much every town hall that I've listened to, it has been us discussing and the public asking questions of how will the JCEs and SCEs be implemented? What will it look like when students move from first farm into JCE and then on to SCE? But my question is, as I stated, like, has it been ventilated what it would look like if everything that you're proposing is placed within our current school system? And thinking on that, what I came to the conclusion is that yes, everything is great to put in place and everything is fantastic and it brings us up to speed of what is happening globally and gives our students and the children of Barbados more opportunity to investigate and explore different options. But it is the culture that is within the mindsets of society as a whole, but also I am proposing it could also be the culture within the Ministry of Education, the administrative level, and also the mindsets that teachers come into the schools that could hinder what you're proposing. Because having new buildings is great, having all the shiny stuff, the robotics, everything is fantastic. And training the teachers is great also, but they need the support after the training. They need to have the continuous collaboration to find out, okay, I've learned this, I implemented it. Can I talk with my colleagues in school, with other teachers in different schools to find out what is working for them and to tweak their delivery accordingly to suit their classroom? So I think that is, in my opinion, that seems to be the biggest issue of what needs to be addressed, and not necessarily pitting new school against old school. I would see that, like CQC, some schools have very strong alumni. We know that Combermere is go up and above and beyond when it comes to their week, and some other schools too. So if the other schools that exist, their alumni, because all of the persons who own businesses and in ministry don't only come from QC and HC and Combermere and Lodge. It's a case of the alumni have to get involved, have to bring up that spirit of the school, and thereby raising the morale of the children to make them feel proud of where they came from, and not just knocking away schools and changing the system and bringing in a two-tier. I just seen dollars walking out the door is an investment, but I seen there's a lot more money towards that than looking and seeing how can we implement what you're proposing within what we have now.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Yeah.
And your question. I believe the chief is going to respond.
I didn't get your name. What is your?
Sorry, Jamila Walton.
Jamila. Thank you, Jamila. You asked if we fully ventilated the...
Putting the concepts of the new system into the old one, all the ideas of having all the different subjects that persons could explore, having these specialties in secondary schools, if that is possible to have that within the current, what I call two-tier, being primary and secondary, opposed to the considered three-tier, which is primary, middle, I call middle, but junior and secondary level. Can what you're proposing of having children explore more be done within the current primary and secondary level, given that the primary are the ones who really need the help. The secondary working out because the principals have figured out what worked for their students and catered accordingly, but it's the feeder system. The primary need the help there, and literacy, as everyone said, because if you can't read, you can't do anything else.
Yes.
Pretty much.
Yes, and we fully agree with you, so thank you for that. And we are placing resources in the primary school. We're trying to, as if you go through the proposal, again, it can be found on www.mes.
I am going to go through that thoroughly and email a full document, no worries.
Right, good. And you will see that we are indeed trying to strengthen the primary level. We ventilated, and we will continue to ventilate, the different models. You asked if we had thought about putting some of these things into the existing system. We have ventilated, but we will continue to ventilate. So you have that assurance from us. You said something about the alumni at each of the schools bringing up the morale of the school. And that's a very good point. But in Barbados, we have a problem. And it became exceedingly clear when we had a recent consultation. I'm not going to tell you with who. But there was a gentleman who has a PhD, but he didn't go to HC. nor did he go to QC. He went to Parkinson. And he said that as a Parkinsonian, he had to struggle with himself all through Parkinson to get to the point where he is now. The point was reiterated by another person who doesn't have a PhD, but is very well known and respected in this country. He said, I went to the St. Leonard's Boys' School, and the hurdles that I had to face, a Harrisonian did not have to face, or a QC student did not have to face. They had to find the intestinal fortitude to pull themselves up by their bootstraps to make it where they are today. So in Barbados, I'm fully aware that there's a culture, there's a sifting and a sorting that has occurred from colonial times that we continue to perpetuate. And I know that sometimes for us, in fact all the time, our perception is our reality, because we can speak from a point of privilege. But there are people, the one or two, who went to this school and went to what they call the lower schools. I don't even like to call it, but went to what they call the lower secondary schools. They come out and do well, and people say, look at the example, look, he is now a doctor, and he is now this, and he is now that. But what about the others who fall through the cracks? And that is the issue that we have with alumni as well. Look to see where the strong alumni are, which schools, because they're proud to be products of those schools. But there are other schools where the alumni ain't too proud to be associated, so they may be out there with a business. And they would say, well, I went to so-and-so school, but I make it. And they may not want to be associated with their school because of what the school meant to them and what it means to Barbados. Let's not fool ourselves, right? So we have to do a lot of deconstructing and reconstructing when it comes to equity, because the same colonial views that existed back then permeate now. And what is sometimes very sad is that we don't even realize it. And that is why we are having a discussion, I know the minister will speak on it, about decolonializing education. Decolonializing education, because there are times that we have to step out from our spaces of privilege, step out of our boxes, and put on the shoes of the guy out there, that man in that consultation who was hurt. You can see that he went to a school and he was hurt, and he was saying, look, I went to this school, but, you know, they tell me all kinds of things, but I make it, and I got a PhD. That is not the story of a Harrisonian, because he's expected to do well. That is not the story of a QC student. So I agree with you in terms of building up, the alumni building up, but we have to deconstruct, to reconstruct, to have the alumni across all schools be on the same level. That is the reality. That is what we're dealing with here.
Thank you, Madam Chief, and thank you for your question, Jamila. I promised two, and so I'm able to take one last question, and then we're going to have to conclude this evening's consultation. I'm sorry. Sorry, Mr. Jackman. Sorry, I didn't hear you. My apologies.
For the whole night, I've been hearing data. Now, to give this data, I'm going to hurt someplace because people knew where I have led. But I became a year head of a school in 1999, and I took up a year group of 164 children in this system that people said tonight was not broken. That year group spent 7 years in the school, and only 50 of the 164 made it to the level that they could write CXC. They recorded only a 45% pass rate of the 50 that wrote CXC. This is the system that is not broken.
My point is not that
yes, there are things to be corrected, but I don't see the solution being the introduction of a junior and a senior. The issues, the ills, unfortunately, for those students having to be in the school for 7 years, would have started from primary school, where in a sense, they just get shuffle up, and there was no intervention then. So my thing is, intervention should be done, not creating a new system will solve the intervention, like actually put the intervention into place and support the teachers as you train them to put things into place. You could have agreements with Stanford, with Columbia, whoever you want to have it with, and train all the teachers to have PhDs and every other letter. But if they don't have the support and the resources from the ministry, or the ministry say, this is what we will give, and let the public know we are giving schools X, Y, and Z, we need corporate to give X, Y, and Z, then everyone will clearly know, okay, this is what I will need to give to my school that my child is going to. It's not a case that we want to put all the load on the ministry, because children belong to a home. That's where they come from, as person said. 7 years, 5 years is where the child is at before they come into the teaching system. Right. So if it's a case that you really need corporate support, clearly say and outline, this is what we will provide to schools, this is what we need parents and the public to provide, so that we could adequately support the children as they go through the system. What happened with the school or any other school that we perceive as new is a result of the teachers' mindsets also. It's not just the children's fault, it's the teacher's mindset of, I teaching at this school, all these children don't see. And then the words that come out of their mouth is not encouraging the children to push themselves. You're tearing them down as you want to teach them. How that makes sense?
Thank you very much.
But you are justified in saying that because they came to the school with between 0 and 30%. Because we have an education system with an exam that differentiates.
All right.
So, Mr. Jackman, Jamila, thank you very much. Yeah. I suspect that is a conversation that will continue offline, and even after this consultation is completed, I want to honor the gentleman who is on his feet, so that he can ask his question, and then we're able to conclude thereafter. Yes, sir.
Good night. I am Romario Hunt. This was not going to be my first point, but I want us not to fall to fallacious logic that because EduTech had a phased implementation and it failed, that we should implement a system on a dime that is liable to a catastrophic failure. And since we are liable to a catastrophic failure, we need to have a fail-safe. What is the fail-safe for a failure to implement this system as envisioned? Now, my main point I wanted to make. As a student in the Masters of Art Education, as a recent graduate from Urdeston in a diploma in secondary education in visual arts, and as a visual arts teacher, why is it that at the senior colleges of excellence, art has been omitted from the core curriculum? If we are talking about having global citizens who are creative and expressive, ought not having subjects that allow them to manifest those skills within themselves be included in the core curriculum? Additionally, as a teacher, one of the fundamental problems I have in implementing the things I was taught at Urdeston, like the differentiated learning, is the structure of the timetable. I, as a teacher, do not have the time to do the administration of the school, as well as plan individual learning plans for students, as well as manage teaching students by myself in a differentiated way. So I think this idea that we have a lack of teachers is not in line with the reality of the classroom, and that needs to be revised. Now, my suggestions. We are talking about having lifelong learners. I suggest that we also include having lifelong teachers, because if we want a society to perpetuate knowledge, every learner must be a teacher. So we must include some form of simple pedagogy within the curriculum. Pacing, as raised, he's not here anymore. Pacing, as raised by him, needs to be addressed if we want to have differentiated learning. And I, as a teacher, cannot pace my lessons if I do not have the time to do so. I need to have the time to do so. Now, I am a person, I'm going to be personal. I don't have a domestic support system. Both of my parents have passed away. And it was like that when I started teaching. And as a teacher, it has been very emotionally draining to deal with almost 150 personalities a day. And teachers do not have any structured emotional support. That needs to be addressed. My time is short, so that is where I'm going to end. But just re-emphasizing, if we want to have a holistic education system with students who are able to express themselves, let us not be regressive and remove the arts from the core curriculum. And finally, we need to have a fail-safe for a system that can have a catastrophic failure. That is all.
Thank you very much, Romari. May have left the panel speechless.
You want to speak? No.
Any response? Any response? Points very well made and suggestions received.
Right.
The question you asked at the beginning was about a fail-safe?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. So I agree with your suggestions with regard to pacing being important. We'll have to look at the curriculum to ensure that teachers have enough time to plan, to make sure they have the time to do what they, to ensure that teaching takes place so that real learning takes place. So that's a very good point. That's why I didn't say anything, because I supported all of what you said. You spoke about the social and emotional support for teachers. We're going to put that in the structure to make sure that teachers are taken care of too. Okay?
Can I ask you a question about that, if you wouldn't mind coming back to the mic? What would that structural support look like for you as a practicing teacher?
So one thing at the school that's very good that I teach at, and I know this may not be a part of the formal system, but some classes have 2 teachers. And that alone has made balancing, you have a person to bounce off the emotional complications that happen within a classroom too. You have somebody who could talk discreetly about the challenges you would have faced within a class. So that would be one thing. Okay. Secondly, the same way that they're guidance counselors for students, they can be counselors for teachers at the school as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Romari. Points well made. So, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want you to run away just yet. We're preparing to conclude. I want to invite the minister who stayed with us throughout the night, and I want to ensure you, as much as our rapporteurs have been taking copious notes of all the contributions that have been made, I know the minister has also been internalizing all of your comments and your submissions. And so, just before we conclude, I want to give the minister the opportunity to make her closing remarks.
Thank you so much. Everyone here is looking so very worn. I must say that it has been, I think this has been just one of the most tremendous experiences I've had in terms of hearing and listening. When you didn't see me here, I was most of the time at the back speaking to other people who were coming and going and getting additional input that they didn't want to give in front of everybody. So just letting you know, we were continuing to gather feedback. But I want to say, just as we close, that we have had an excellent education system in Barbados for a very long time. Many of us, we have built our lives, we've built our careers, we've bought our homes, it has made many of us who we are today. And I think that first we start by valuing what has already been achieved within this education system. I think as we now move on, it is important to understand we're not seeking to abandon what has already been, but what we're seeking to do is to build on it. And I know that if I speak to any one of you in here, many of the faces, with the exception of this middle row here, many of you will tell me you left school back in the 80s or the 90s or the 2000s. And if I also ask you, you will say that the world in 1989 and 1999 is different than the world of 2023. And it will be different than the world of 2035. We therefore, admitting that the world has changed, we cannot therefore keep educating our children the way we did way back then. And we cannot tell ourselves that by staying stuck and holding on to the legacy of what has been so good for all of us, that is the way in which we will prepare for a better future for this country. We have to start moving from here. We cannot stay stuck. And it means that all of us, as we heard many say, we have to re-examine our mindsets. And we have to look farther than what we already know and consider the possibilities in the world. There was one young lady who made a presentation earlier, and I thought it was an excellent presentation. And one of the things she shared was that, what about when we get out of school and then we don't have the jobs, and what if we go through this program and when we get out we don't have jobs? I'm going to share something with you with how the world has changed. Today, the Prime Minister and I, we were meeting with a number of companies who are partnering with us in education. One of the things that was real, very real, is that in the last year, we did training for persons in cybersecurity, young people, various ages. Of those that graduated, about 120 odd, 100% of them are now employed. The story of today that we got, you had one young man, his cousin, his brother went through the first cohort and passed and are now fully engaged, minimum, all of them, minimum 5,000 Barbados dollars a month after 4 months of training. In this cohort that's going through now in the same Cyber Nation cybersecurity is the wife of the gentleman. Now, let us just do some basic adding. Of course, what they earn will increase as they increase their skills. You have 4 people in the same family who have now 4 multiplied by 5,000 is how much?
20.
How much?
20.
It's 20?
20,000.
20,000. Now multiply that by them over 12 months of the year. Now when you multiply 20,000 by 12, what are you getting? What are you getting?
A lot.
A lot of money. Now they have now increased in less than 12 months the earnings in one family by 5 times 4 multiplied by 12 months a year. The point I am making here is that there was a time when you learn now and you don't earn until all the way down there. The link between learning and earning has to be made more, the gap has to be closed. And where the world is moving now in terms of skills-based hiring, don't take it from me, go research it. Skills-based hiring is where the world is moving now. And once we are able to see that that is the way of the future of work and the future of livelihoods, we then recognize that what we are seeking to do here is actually going to accelerate people's ability to learn and earn and do it much more closely. And guess what? All 120 of those are working for companies outside of Barbados while still living here in Barbados. It's a whole new world. So some of the old models that we have about whether we can access the world, I'm just giving you that as one example of how in less than a year, a family's trajectory and their economic situation has been transformed. And it did not take waiting for that length of time. More and more the future of work, this is where it is going. And our education system has to prepare. And of those, some of them are now themselves creating businesses that after they have completed this term of their work, they're now able to run their business and sell back their services to some of the companies for whom they're working overseas. I just thought I wanted to share that because I needed to give you an illustration of how the world has changed. And with generative AI doing what it's doing, again, I don't have time to explain that, just research it. You're going to recognize that this is the slowest that the world will change in our lifetime. It will only get faster from here. And so when we are saying Barbados, go slow, go slow, go slow, it will only be a matter of time where we are not simply left behind, but we will be left out. And so I say, let us examine what we are seeking to do, not holding on to all that we already know. Let's give it its value. Let's recognize it for what it has been, but understand we will not prepare our children to face the future by us staying stuck where we are. Now these consultations was all about you helping us figure out how do we move forward. And I want to thank you all for the very special contributions that you have made. You have been heard. You have been heard. And we will spend the next several weeks consolidating the input that you have given from these consultations, from the numerous documents you've already sent to us, from responses that are coming on social media. We are paying attention to those as well. And as we pull those together, we will take the opportunity then to produce something that is more updated and be able to share with you as well. I know we all need to go. I just want to say a couple other things. In many of these consultations, and I've been at all of them, many people have shared their fears, their concerns, and made contributions as to how we move forward. What has not come out is that these education transformational proposals, they're not just about the structures of the system. There is an entire area that deals with teacher training and professional development, because we recognize if teachers can't teach, students can't learn. We have excellent teachers within our system, but understand that the child they faced in 2023 will not be the child they will face 10 years from now. So continuous professional development has to be added to training. So you train, but then you keep them on the cutting edge. That is an investment that we are going to make regardless, because we have to make sure that we do better to support our teachers. And we thank the last speaker for suggestions on what other types of support might also be given to our teachers. Leadership training. We will notice that many of the schools that are doing the best are also the schools with some exceptional leaders. School leadership matters. We have to make that investment in school leadership. Also, part of these proposals that we haven't heard a lot about is some of the work that we have to do with curriculum development. That work has already begun. You know that we now are doing coding and robotics all the way from nursery now, all the way to secondary. We introduced the civics curriculum last year. And now this year, there is a gamified version, meaning it has been turned into a game for Class 1 students. Not because we just felt like giving them something to play with, but because the research is saying that the retention can improve up to 90% when you start to gamify a curriculum. And therefore, again, we're using research to help us make some strides. We are not waiting until 2025 to do everything. We recognize that we have to start moving now. There are some things that just cannot wait, like teacher training, significant part of which happened over the summer just gone, and the leadership training as well. We will continue to make that investment in teacher training and professional development, because regardless of what decisions we make about the rest of these proposals, we have to give them the support that they need to do better by our children. I will say to close, the Ministry of Education, and I am going to put it out there, is not fully equipped as it is set up right now to implement all. Right now we have in Barbados a team that is doing an audit of our schools and of our ministry. And at the end of that audit, we know here is where we need to get, but the audit is going to tell us where we stand now, so that then we understand that the investment that has to be made will need to close that gap. So when you ask us about the investments that we will have to make, the investment isn't just with the system out there. We have to fix the Ministry of Education as well. And we recognize that, and we are doing the proper audits so that we now have evidence of what we have and what we need to strengthen, what we need to get rid of, and what we must keep. And once we have a full understanding of that and we know where we're trying to get, then we can tell you what the investment will be to get us from here to there. So for those of you who are questioning what will the investment take, let us complete the audits. Let us complete the audits, because then the audits will be able to tell us where we are in a very extensive way, so that we understand the gap we have to cover to get where we need to go. And I'm just going to ask all of you, let us think beyond today. We know the jobs that most of our children will be working in do not currently exist. So what many of us are thinking about will probably not even be where our children will end up. We do not even know what school will look like in 10, 15 years. It may not be 4 walls. And in many cases, it still isn't now. And so I am asking you to step outside of what you know and dream in possibilities. And let us not limit ourselves by all that we have done before, and give ourselves a chance to step into something greater and bigger beyond. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate your contribution over these last several
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Minister McConney. Just 2 final things before we conclude. The Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, in collaboration with the University of the West Indies School of Education, Cave Hill campus, presents a free public lecture, The Journey to Transformation, from Colonized Roots to Decolonized Fruits. The presenter, educational leadership consultant Rosemary Campbell-Stevens, who is here this evening. If she can just stand, Rosemary, so we can see you. She is the presenter of the lecture, which takes place tomorrow, November 23rd at 6:30 p.m. at Frank Collimer Hall. So if you are available, if there are any adjustments you can make in your schedule to get there, it is promising to be a rich and engaging experience. And it's going to be streamed also, but we want you all there in person. If you can make it there at Frank Collimer Hall, tomorrow 6:30, Rosemary Campbell-Stevens will be leading us the journey to transformation from colonized roots to decolonized fruits. Minister?
I just want to say one more thing. This consultation may be the end of the public consultations for now, but if you have parent-teachers associations, if you have neighborhood groups, if you have fathers, mothers, families, small groups who really still have some burning questions and some burning concerns, please get in touch with our ministry. We will be happy to come out to the extent that we can and do small group meetings with anyone, anywhere. I have done the rum shops a little while ago. I've been walking door to door in communities. Right now, the conversation is not over. So please invite us, bring your small groups together, and give us the opportunity to come in and continue to share. Storm, who was one of the HC students who spoke earlier, I spoke with her. I said, look, You had some questions. I was able to clear up some of the questions at the back door, but there were other students like her who didn't get to hear what I shared and therefore didn't get a different perspective because there were some misunderstandings about what was being proposed. So please, students, bring together your groups of students and let us come and clear up as well some of the concerns that you may have. That's all I wanted to say. The conversation is not over. Bring your small groups and let us come and help.
Thank you so much, Minister, for that final point. I'm sorry, I thought someone was saying something. Thank you so much. It's just left for me then to close by thanking the members of the head table for their contributions and your leadership this evening. I want to thank also for videography and streaming services, the Media Resource Department, audio, AccuSounds, digital screen operating, AccuSounds also, lighting, intelligent lighting, graphic design, banners and the digital graphics, Gio Romero Designs, artistic and creative direction, Dr. Denise Charles, event production, Randy Eastman. I must thank Chanel Brathwaite and Bonnie Leonce. Our sign language interpreters, don't they do a phenomenal job for us nationally? Not just this evening. Our ushers from the Transformation Unit staff, our rapporteurs, our note takers, thank you so much, ladies, for your amazing work. All media houses in attendance, and indeed, all of you, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, for your time, your patience, and your rich contributions this evening. My name is Raphael Saul. Pleasure to be your host. Wishing you a wonderful evening. Do travel safely.